What if Earth once knew something and forgot? What if the stones remember what the sky has long since buried? Wherever you are tonight, I'm glad you're here. In this soft silence between waking and sleep, between memory and myth, let us drift. Not through time, but through what time leaves behind. Let the earth speak in layers and lullabies, in ash and isotope. Let the continents breathe again, not with thunder, but with the hush of something once vast, now sleeping beneath our feet. Before there were borders, before even coastlines, there was only pressure and drift. The earth did not begin with continents. They came later, like scars healing in strange directions. In the slow collapse of a newborn planet, in the simmering quiet after molten storms, the crust cracked, then folded, then rose. Land did not erupt. It exhaled, out of silicates and time. And so, the first bones of Earth's body, what we would one day call cratons, settled into shape. Not shape like geometry, but shape like memory. They carried with them the quiet blueprints of becoming, grains of zircon, older than any ocean, flecked with uranium's breath, whispering the age of stars, long since gone. But continents, as we name them now, are not bodies. They are stories, layered in silence, told not by voices, but by collisions. Pangaea was not the first, not even the second. There were other supercontinents before it, older, stranger, unnamed by most maps. Columbia, Rodinia, Nuna, their names little more than fossil smoke, guesses painted on vanished puzzles. They did not fracture, they eroded into forgetting, because the Earth does not remember with permanence, it remembers with movement. Each plate a drifting thought, each rift a sigh, each mountain chain a moment of resistance that could not hold. And below all this, beneath the drifting, beneath the visible, lay the bones, the cratonic roots, ancient, stable, heavy with pressure, land that refused to melt. They do not move like plates, they do not float like crust. They sink, they anchor, they are the forgotten vertebrae of ancient lands, now fractured across the globe. Parts of Canada whisper to buried shards in Greenland. Australia carries a scar that once kissed Antarctica's brow. And Africa holds one of the oldest silences of all, the Kapval, a basin of time so deep it has never known true erosion. Beneath all continents, there are deeper continents, ghosts beneath ghosts. But no, they are not lost, only folded, because the planet doesn't lose things. It subducts them. It presses memory downward until it becomes weight, and what is not weight dissolves. So we walk, every day, over bones we cannot name, the ground beneath our cities, our nations, our histories, rests on stories billions of years old, not bones of creatures, but of creation itself. Somewhere beneath the Himalayas lie fragments of land that were once part of Gondwana, before that, part of Rodinia, before that, no one knows. Because before land had names, it had only heat. And heat doesn't archive, it erases, it flows, and yet something endures. In every continent, there are minerals that don't belong, rocks that wandered, grains that travelled oceans, before oceans were born, small, silent anomalies, truths that don't fit the map. Geologists call them terrains, outsider rocks, land that hitched rides, on other plates, crashed ashore and stayed, like strangers who never spoke the local tongue, but buried themselves, in the soil anyway. These terrans, these outcasts, are proof that the earth does not evolve in straight lines. It folds inward, it forgets, it merges with itself, until story and structure are no longer separate, until the bones beneath the map become the only truth worth trusting. And the truth is simple. Continents do not drift, they mourn. They drift because they lost something they cannot name, a pressure, a partner, a place. And they are still looking. Even now, beneath the oceans, the bones move. Slowly, softly, like a sleeping animal, turning in a dream. It cannot escape. Land is not still. It only pretends to be. Beneath the quiet meadows and mountain echoes, beneath the cities and stories and songlines, there is always motion, always forgetting, always return. But return is never clean. The earth does not rewind. It recycles. Continents are not the beginning of story. They are the residue. What came before them was molten, mad, and nameless. A world of fire ash seas and crust that cracked as easily as dreams. This world Archean, they now say, was not built for life. It was life in waiting. And from its breath, the first bones were carved, not by hands, not by time as we know it, but by pressure and pause. The way glaciers sculpt silence, the way gravity slowly writes its name into the spine of a planet. Cratons, slabs of lithospheric stubbornness. They sank, not because they were weak, but because they were denser than time. These buried blocks became the deep hearts of every continent, anchors of stability in a world drunk on subduction. You can't see them from space. You can't map them with lines, but they're there, like old grief beneath new laughter, like lullabies whispered beneath thunder. There are rocks in Canada's shield that have not moved in over 4 billion years. 4 billion, older than the moon's tides, older than DNA's first attempt at memory. They do not remember in language, but they hold the isotope breath of stars that died before Earth even dreamed of oceans. Each grain of zircon, each fleck of decayed uranium, each pale shimmer of feldspar is a sentence in the geologic novel no one will ever finish reading, not because it's incomplete, but because it loops, like myth, like dreams, like tectonic longing. And what loops cannot end. Somewhere under Brazil, beneath the forests and the rot, sleeps a chunk of ancient rock that was once welded to West Africa. It was torn in silence when the Atlantic was born, not with a roar, but with a long, wet sigh that took millions of years to exhale. This divorce of stone from stone left scars, not visible ones, but magnetic ones. The minerals still point the wrong way, like compass needles, searching for a pole that no longer exists. That is how we know. Not from photographs, not from memory, but from residue. The Earth's crust is a quilt of exile, bits of old homes, stitched into new shapes by the patient fingers of heat. Tyrannies, cratons, fold belts, a vocabulary of loss. And what is a supercontinent but a brief truce? In the long war of motion, Pangaea, for all its glory, was just the latest. Before it, Gondwana, Laurasia. Before those, Rodinia, Nuna, Valbara. Names we whisper into ancient diagrams. Names the land itself never knew. Because land does not name itself, it only yields. Imagine this, a continent, larger than anything now known, rising slowly from a primeval sea. No plants, no birds, no memory, just wind and basalt and silence. It breaks apart, not with violence, but with weariness. Its pieces scatter into the bones of India, the crust of Greenland, the hidden roots beneath the South Pole. And billions of years later, someone finds a rock that shouldn't be here, a fingerprint with no hand, a reminder of a land with no name. The continents we stand on are not destinations, they are pauses. Each will drift again, merge, fracture, vanish. What holds them is not permanence, but memory pressed into pressure. The bones beneath the map are not past. They are pause, they are waiting, and the planet, with all its shifting skin and volcanic size, still listens for something it once was, something it buried so deeply not even magma can melt it. Somewhere beneath the Indian Ocean, a sunken continent sleeps. Its name, if it ever had one, is lost, but fragments remain, buried in volcanic sands, locked inside crystals that should not exist. They call it Mauritius now, a ghost continent. torn from Madagascar's side. When Gondwana exhaled and scattered its children across the sea, Mauritius didn't vanish. It was submerged, folded beneath fire, entombed in silence. But it left behind whispers, zircon grains, so old they predate the ocean itself, found in lava flows, where no ancient rock should be, like memories burning their way back into the body. And that is how the earth remembers, not in full sentences, not in relics we can hold, but in contradiction, the wrong grain, in the wrong rock, in the wrong place, the truth hiding in impossible corners, because nothing on this planet is ever truly gone, only subducted, only melted, only rewritten in a different script. The map of the world, you know, is not the world that is. The surface is deception, a temporary puzzle of drifting shapes that fit together only for a moment before separating again, like lovers who knew it wouldn't last. The real Earth lies beneath the lithosphere, beneath the basins and ridges, beneath the magnetic lines we mistake for permanence. It lies in the roots, the cratons. They are not flat, they are keel-shaped, dipping down into the mantle, like anchors, keeping the land from floating away. But nothing stays forever. Even the deepest bones eventually crack. Even the most stable roots feel the pull of Earth's long forgetting. And when they fracture, they whisper strange truths. There is a place in North America called the Grenville Province. It stretches like a scar from Labrador to Texas. Beneath it lies the ghost of a mountain chain, older than the Appalachians, older than the Atlantic, older than almost everything. It was once part of a supercontinent that no one remembers, not because it wasn't real, but because it didn't leave enough behind. The rocks are twisted, the minerals are tired, and in their exhaustion, they reveal a history, not of construction, but of collapse, not of creation, but of erosion. There is a myth in nearly every culture of a lost land, a sunken homeland, an Atlantis, but perhaps it is not a myth. Perhaps it is memory, not human memory, geologic memory. Maybe the Earth itself is haunted by the places it has lost, and maybe it tells us, in magnetism, in mineral, in drift, hoping someone will listen, not to fix it, not to explain it, but simply to remember, because remembering is the only permanence the Earth allows. It erases everything else, but the ache lingers. The ache becomes sediment. The sediment becomes stone, and the stone becomes message. That's what every grain of zircon is, a message from a world that no longer exists. A fossil, not of bone, but of time. The bones beneath the map are not done shifting. They dream in pressure. They speak in quakes, and deep beneath them, below even the deepest roots, lies something older still, not land, not sea, just breath. The breath of the mantle, the slow, hot exhale that moves the continents like feathers on a sleeping chest. And that breath never stops. It folds, it lifts, it subducts, it sings. In frequencies too low for ears, in rhythms too slow for clocks. But the land hears it, the bones hear it, and sometimes, when the wind is right and the stone is quiet, we hear it too, a soft murmur beneath the humming of the earth, a pulse beneath the map, the sound of something ancient, trying not to be forgotten. Not all that lies beneath is quiet. Some stones hum, not with sound, but with time vibrating softly, in isotopic decay, a rhythm beyond hearing, a lullaby composed in uranium's breath. Even silence has half-lives. In the Pilbara region of Western Australia, there are rocks older than multicellular life. They do not speak, but they glow, not to the eye, but to the instrument. To those who know how to listen, and what they say is not a story. It is a presence. They are not here to teach. They are here to endure. Granite domes, thrust upward by forgotten forces, weathered down by time, as though time itself were rain. But the bones hold. They always do. Imagine holding a piece of land that hasn't moved. in nearly 4 billion years. A part of the Earth, so ancient, its age makes fossils feel young, not because it resisted motion, but because it remembered how to stay. This, too, is intelligence. Not the kind that builds or speaks, but the kind that survives, the kind that outlasts. And deep time does not favour the loud, it favours the buried. In Finland, beneath the forests, beneath the lakes, is a shield of stone, so old it barely breathes. But in its layers are echoes of volcanoes that erupted before oxygen ever touched the sky. Lava that poured, not red, but black, into an atmosphere, alien to everything. We now know there were no witnesses, no birds in flight, no trees to burn, only stone. And in that solitude, the bones were formed, not by hand, not by plan, but by the unhurried will of heat. What is a continent, if not a habit? A place where the planet chooses to hold, to anchor itself for a time, until the breath of the mantle pulls it away again. It is not punishment, it is not loss, it is just the way the planet dreams, not in stillness, but in movement. Once, all the land was one, not in harmony, not in peace, just one. Pangaea was its name, but names are always afterthoughts. It stretched from pole to pole, a single, jagged body resting on the mantle's warmth, and then it broke. Not suddenly, but like sleep leaving the body, first a shiver, then a shift, then a forgetting, and each fragment became a continent. Each continent carried its own memory of wholeness, of connection, of rupture. That memory is not in the soil, it is not in the air, it is in the alignment of the oldest rocks. It is in the trail of minerals that match no present neighbour, in the magnetic fields frozen into lava as it cooled in directions no longer true. A kind of fossil, not of life, but of position. A memory of where the land was, when the stone last cooled, like a compass left behind by a drifting ghost. They say the continents will return, that one day, in a future so distant, it has no scale, the plates will reunite. Another supercontinent, a new name, a new pause, but it will not be the same, because no reunion ever is. Each piece will bring its own scars, its own sediments, its own silences, and the bones beneath the map will shift once more. They do not resist change, they welcome it, because the bones do not serve the surface, they serve the breath. There is a place beneath the South Pole where land has been buried for over 1 billion years. They call it East Antarctica, but that name means nothing to stone. It is one of the oldest, coldest, quietest masses of land on the planet. Its heart, the East Antarctic Shield, has not moved in deep time. It remembers Pangaea. It remembers Gondwana. It remembers everything the rest of the world forgot. But it does not speak. It only endures, and beneath its ice, the bones dream, not of warmth, not of life, but of weight, of being what everything else was built upon. So when you look at a map, at the bright shapes of nation and ocean, remember, that is not the world. It is the surface of a deeper memory, a memory that cannot be mapped, only felt in the tremble of fault lines, in the shape of mountain roots, in the silence that sleeps beneath the skin of earth, where bones are not fossils, but time made solid. Every continent is a ghost story, but not of the dead, of the never-born, of the almost remembered. Beneath the living forests, beneath the glittering cities, beneath the rivers and roads and reach of names, there are fragments from lands that never surfaced, continent-sized secrets, never kissed by air, never brushed by light, hidden not by distance, but by depth. There is a word for this forgetting, a word for when a continent is swallowed whole: subduction, the act of folding one piece of earth beneath another. But it is not destruction, it is preservation by burial. like pressing a book closed, like closing eyes to dream. When crust is subducted, it melts slowly, surrenders, not to fire, but to memory. And in that descent, some parts stay solid, slices of ancient land carried deep into the mantle, never to return, unless the earth decides to raise them again. Sometimes it does. Sometimes ancient roots are lifted by mountain-making collisions, brought back to the surface, like echoes, surfacing from sleep. In Norway, you can touch rocks that were once 20 miles deep, formed beneath a vanished ocean, crushed in the birth of a range that no longer stands. You can stand on them. You can feel the pressure still radiating from their grain, because stone remembers in density, because pressure never fully fades. And what of the seas? The ocean floor is younger than the land. It forms, it spreads, it sinks again. The deep sea floor is not a keeper. It is a passage. But even there, the bones exist. Scattered pieces of continental crust, buried beneath silt, forgotten beneath salt, like teeth, left in a long-vanished jaw. In the Indian Ocean, beneath layers of volcanic basalt, lie fragments of a land no one lived on, no one named. A microcontinent, broken, drowned, its edges now traced only by gravity maps, by the strange way satellites sense a heaviness beneath the sea. The earth whispers, even through the water. It always whispers what it cannot say, and what it cannot say is this, that the land is not land. It is longing, longing to return to what it was before it was divided, before it drifted and cracked and cooled. The continents do not seek completion. They seek reunion, but not to heal, to remember, to align their bones with what they once were. Even now, the plates move, centimeters per year, slower than thought, faster than forgetting. And in 10 million years, a blink for stone, the shapes will change again. Africa will kiss Europe. Australia will drift northward. California will slide past itself. The map will lose meaning. Only the bones will matter, and they will not mind, because they have done this before, many times, many forms, and each time they remember a little less, and become a little more. So the bones beneath the map, these ancient, anchoring truths, they are not history. They are hope. Hope that even after rupture, something endures. Hope that even after subduction, some memory remains unburned. Hope that the planet never forgets itself, even when it forgets everything else. To end a chapter about land is to return to silence, because land is not the beginning or the destination. It is the pause between oceans, the stillness between floods, the breath between collisions. Land is what rises when memory can no longer bear to be buried, and the bones beneath it, they are not answers, they are questions, so old they no longer need asking, only listening. So we listen, and in that listening, the earth breathes, and what it buried, it never truly forgot. Before the sea knew how to sing, it only listened. Before life arrived, before the fins, the spines, the coral breath, there was only water, heavy, dark, endless. An ocean without names, without shores, without memory. It did not sparkle. It did not crash. It simply held the earth's first breath, held the warmth of mantle size, held the silence of a planet, still deciding what to become. We imagine early Earth as fire, volcanoes, lava, storms that tore the sky. But that was only the overture. The rest was water. Water that rained for millions of years, falling from a sky too thick to see through, where clouds were more like oceans themselves, falling from comets, icy visitors bearing ancient hydrogen, gifts from beyond the inner planets. And when that water gathered, when it filled the basins, carved by gravity and time, it didn't rush to life. It waited longer than any silence has ever waited, because creation is not eager, it is patient. These first oceans were not like ours. They were heavy with iron, suffused with minerals, leaking from newborn crust. A chemical cauldron, breathing methane, simmering with heat from the wounds of a still cooling core. And in that heat, nothing yet stirred. No plankton, no algae, no light. Only darkness, folded in warmth. Only elements. Learning to speak to one another, not with sound, with bond, with charge, with pattern, with the promise of future shapes, still forming in the dark. The earth was young then, but the ocean was older. Older in the way that dreaming can feel older than waking. Older in the way that stillness outlasts movement. It was the ocean that held the sky in place, that wore the land down, before land had a name, that absorbed every impact, every volcanic tantrum, every chemical whisper of a changing atmosphere. It was the ocean that became the planet's first mirror, not reflecting light, reflecting memory. And yet, no eye saw it, no gill stirred it, no scale shimmered within it. This was an ocean without witness, a sea without swimmer, without shorebird, without shell. And yet, it was alive, not in the way we count life now, but in its readiness, in its hunger for connection, in its willingness to hold everything, to dissolve the minerals, to cradle the gases, to bear the heat and wait for the cool, to become the cradle. There is a silence that only water knows, a pressure that never rises to the surface. The early ocean was built from that silence. Every drop carried weight, not just of hydrogen and oxygen, but of longing. A longing to become more than chemistry, to become invitation. We find remnants of this primordial sea, not in photographs, but in stone, in rocks that were once mud on a sea floor. 4 billion years gone, we call them banded iron formations. Stripes of rust and grey, trapped in ancient rhythm. They tell us the ocean once breathed iron until oxygen arrived uninvited. And when it did, everything changed. But not yet. Not now. Now. In this chapter, we stay with the silence, with the ocean that knew how to hold, before it knew how to create, with the water that carried every possibility, but no shape, with the saltless tide of Earth's first waiting. No witness watched it rise, no memory captured its edge, but still it rose, still it gathered in the low places, still it folded over volcanic scars, like a blanket over fevered skin. And in that warmth, something impossible began to stir. Not life, not yet, but something more patient. The dream of a cell, the whisper of a bond, the pause before breath. Even now, beneath the deepest trenches, something of that silence remains. A pressure older than skeleton, a darkness older than light, a memory older than memory. And the ocean, still breathing, still reaching, still holding the land in place, remembers, not with words, not with waves, but with depth, with silence so complete, it becomes presence, with stillness so vast, it becomes origin. The ocean had no witness, but it was not alone. It had time, it had heat, it had gravity, and slowly it began to dream of life, of light, of motion. But the dream would take eons to wake, and so the water waited, and still waits. The ocean does not remember, like the land does. It doesn't archive in stone. It doesn't keep fossils well. It does not hold on to shape. It dissolves. It erodes. It carries things away and forgets where it put them. But even forgetting is a kind of memory. Even erasure leaves a trace. In the ancient sea, there were no waves as we know them, no tides pulled by a stable moon, no coral reefs for water to cradle. The planet spun faster then, its days short, its winds violent, and the ocean, newborn and breathless, wore the sky like a veil of steam. The pressure was immense, not just in weight, but in waiting, waiting for the right spark, the right collision, the right chaos to become order. And when it came, it was not sudden. Life did not burst forth. It simmered. It gathered itself in the quiet pockets, the warm fractures of volcanic breath. Hydrothermal vents, dark chimneys at the bottom of the sea, became the cradles, not of species, but of the idea of becoming. There, in the darkness, in the mineral-rich warmth, molecules whispered to each other. They bonded, they folded, they failed, and folded again, like lullabies, practiced in the womb of the world. Some of those molecules, fragments of RNA, perhaps, learned to hold shape, to copy, to remain, the earliest echo of something we would one day call life. But it was not a spark. It was a slow, patient burn, a candle made from carbon and possibility. And the ocean held it all, not because it knew what would come, but because it knew how to wait. Even now, some of these vents remain, black smokers, churning out minerals and heat into the frozen deep. Around them, strange ecosystems thrive. Worms with no eyes, clams with no mouths, bacteria that eat sulfur as if it were sunlight. They are not ancient in form, but they are ancient in soul. They remember, somehow, what it means to begin in darkness, to feed without light, to breathe without sky, to exist without witness. What is the sea, if not a mirror, turned inward? The early ocean reflected nothing. It absorbed, it swallowed the sun in its thick metallic veil. But beneath that silence, light was being born, in other ways. Not photons, but potential. Not brightness, but bond. What shimmered in that water was the slow awakening of interaction. Not eyes seeing, but atoms reaching. Not beauty, but balance. And when balance is found, when pressure and heat and mineral and bond align, a rhythm begins. The first rhythms were not heartbeats. They were cycles of carbon, of nitrogen, of sulfur, breaths taken not by lungs, but by oceans. These elemental patterns became the body of the planet, not flesh, not bone, but law, but rhythm, but ritual. Even today, when we dive into the deep mid-ocean ridges, into the dark folds, where light has never entered, we are not visiting strangers. We are visiting origins. The same chemistry still pulses there, the same dance of molecules in vents of shadowed heat. And though the forms are new, the memory is old, so old, it predates skeleton, so old, it never needed to evolve. The earliest oceans were not just water. They were breath. They were promise. A promise made, not to us, but to time. A promise that what begins in silence will one day sing. But first, stillness. First, patience. First, the long, quiet unfolding of becoming. We call them prebiotic seas, as if they existed only for what came next. But that's not true. They existed for themselves, for the sheer gravity of holding what nothing else could. They were the body, the planet built to carry the unbearable weight of what was to come. And even when life began to stir, even when the first cells broke the surface tension of impossibility, the ocean did not change. It did not celebrate. It did not grieve. It simply held, because the ocean does not witness. It cradles, and cradling is enough. Somewhere, beneath 6 miles of pressure, in a trench untouched by light, a droplet of water moves, the same shape as the ones that waited 4 billion years ago. No eyes see it, no minds name it, but it is there, moving, cradling, becoming, because the ocean never stopped, and silence, when deep enough, becomes origin. In the deepest parts of the sea, light is not merely absent, it is irrelevant. No ray has reached there, no dawn has broken, and yet things move, currents drift like forgotten thoughts, thermal whispers spiral from hidden vents, particles settle as if tucking themselves in for a rest. Measured in millennia, the early oceans had no colour, not blue, not green, not even black. Colour is a language of reflection, and there was nothing yet to speak it. Instead, they existed in density, in depth, in the weighted hush of a planet learning to cool. The surface boiled, storms churned. The sky was thick with carbon breath, but far beneath, in the calm, cold basins, there was stillness, and in that stillness, patterns began, not by design, not by miracle, but because time, when left undisturbed, builds meaning. Meaning is not invention, it is erosion. It is what remains after everything else has washed away. The ocean floor is not a clean slate. It is layered in memory. Even in the earliest seas, particles of dust, volcanic ash, metallic silt, they fell slowly, settling like pages of an unwritten book. They buried the past. Even as it happened, they entombed what no eye had seen. And so began the ocean's quiet authorship. There are rocks in Greenland that carry the chemical signature of ancient seawater. Not fossils, not shells, just ratios, delicate balances of isotopes that tell us what the water once held. A kind of ghost tasting, a forensic poetry, written in calcium and strontium. From these whispers, we know the sea changed. It thickened, it salted, the chemistry danced. As continents cracked, as gases rose from the mantle, as rain carved new veins into the newborn crust, the sea absorbed it all, not like a sponge, but like a mind. And that mind was generous. It held the carbon the sky could not keep. It held the heat that land could not bear. It buffered, it breathed, it made life possible before life had arrived. But it was not empty. It shimmered with potential. In the microseconds between chemical reactions, in the tension of ions seeking balance, existed the blueprint for everything to come. Cells, organs, thought, memory, all seeded in this primal soup of pressure and patience. We think of oceans as blue, but in the Archean they were red, not with blood, with iron. Before oxygen, the oceans were saturated with dissolved ferrous iron, floating, waiting, restless. Then came photosynthesis. Tiny, invisible architects, cyanobacteria, began to breathe out what the earth had never held, oxygen. At first, it met iron, and the sea rusted. Literally, iron oxidized, precipitated, sank, and in its sinking left behind layer after layer of ironstone banded with silence, a record, a rhythm, proof that something invisible had changed everything. This was the great oxidation, a long, slow rising of breath into the sky. But the ocean was where it began, where breath first practiced, where cells first sacrificed. For oxygen is not a gift, it is a poison to those unprepared. Many early forms died, drowned in the very air they unknowingly created, and the sea absorbed their grief. It took the oxygen, it took the corpses, it layered both into sediment, because that is what oceans do. They bury without mourning, and in that burial they preserve. So now, when geologists chip away at banded iron formations, they're not uncovering rock. They're reading a eulogy for a world no longer here, for a chemistry no longer welcome, for an age before breath had consequence. And yet, beneath the sorrow, there was something else, possibility, because once the iron was gone, once the ocean stopped rusting, the oxygen rose into the sky, changed the air, changed the sea, allowed for new life to find new ways to survive, allowed cells to grow complex, allowed light to matter, and in that shimmering shift, the ocean, once unseen, became mirror, became nursery, became home. But it has never forgotten its older shape, the shape of red tides without life, the shape of heat without flame. The ocean holds those memories still, in salinity, in stratification, in the curl of deep-sea vents, still exhaling Earth's first breath. Every wave that breaks now carries with it 1 trillion years of chemistry. Every droplet is a historian. It speaks in salt, in trace metals, in suspended dust from continents that no longer exist. It speaks, but not to be heard, only to remain, because water does not speak loudly. It seeps, it surrounds, it stays. And in that staying, the earliest oceans still exist. In our blood, in our cells, in the shadows of hydrothermal vents, in the deep, unmoving trenches where no light walks, but memory does. Quietly, like a ghost, with no name, there is a place in the Pacific, so still, so dark, that even tectonic whispers go unheard. The Mariana Trench, a wound in the Earth's crust, deeper than Everest, is tall, but it is not depth that matters. It is duration, how long the water has waited there, unchanged, undisturbed, unwitnessed. The trench is not a scar, it is a library, and its shelves are lined with pages, too heavy to lift. In these lowest chambers, everything slows. Decay becomes drift, movement becomes memory. Even light, if it could reach, would bend. And down there, in the quiet folds of pressure, lie remnants of the first rain, trapped, folded, compressed, but never erased. Water is not just water, it is the archivist of time. Every molecule has passed through comet, through cloud, through crust. Each carries a signature older than planets, a lineage etched in isotope. And yet, even in this vault of silence, there are lives, microbes, older than bones, more enduring than stone, cling to the minerals, like they're holding the planet's breath. These extremophiles are not exceptions, they are origins. They don't just survive the abyss, they remember it. They are echoes of the first cell that dared to divide in the dark, not for a purpose, not for a future, only because division was a way to remain. The early ocean did not offer life a ladder. It offered it a tide, no progress, no ascent, just movement, just dissolution, just the ceaseless exchange of form for form. And from that tide, everything emerged. The first lipid walls, the first coded sequences, the first self. And even now, life is still made from that same sea. The amniotic fluid in which mammals grow is salt water. Its composition mirrors the ocean from 3 billion years ago, before fish, before bones, when all life was still soup. The sea never left us. It just moved inside. Tears, too, carry salt, not by accident, not by design, but because grief was born in water. Grief, like life, needs a current. There is a theory, whispered among geologists, that oceans might have existed, even before the moon. That water pooled on Earth's surface, while it still burned. If that is true, then the ocean is older than the tides that now move it, older than the pull that taught it rhythm, a memory, older than gravity's hand. And yet it learned. It learned to follow the moon, to rise and fall, not just with pressure, but with longing. The first tides were strange things, shallow, erratic, but the sea adjusted, as it always does, because the sea is the most adaptive silence the earth has ever known. It carved shorelines long before there were eyes to see them. It drew rivers into its own arms. It wore down mountains into grains, small enough to swallow, not in violence, in repetition, in breath, and still it watches. It watches from the cliffs, from the shallows, from beneath the boats that come and go, like brief questions. It watches, not for answers, but for remembering. So much has happened since the first oceans cooled. Continents danced, species bloomed and vanished. Skies changed colour. The atmosphere wrote and rewrote itself, like a diary made of vapour. But the ocean remained. It changed its costume, but never its soul. It has always been the place between things, between heat and cold, between death and life, between silence and song. We call it ocean, as if it were one thing, as if it had borders, but it does not. It cannot. It is not a thing. It is a condition. It is the earth in its liquid state. The earth as held breath. The earth as a lullaby. It sings to itself in the dark. And that is why no witness was needed, because some beginnings are too sacred to be observed. Some origins demand solitude. The early oceans were one such origin. They did not perform. They gestated. And in that hidden warmth, life arrived. Not like a miracle, but like a murmur, finally answered. Now, when the wind presses the sea, when a wave folds into another wave, when the tides touch the same rock for the 10,000th time, you are watching memory, not repetition. You are watching the ocean. Try to remember what it once held, and what it lost, and what it still dreams beneath the trenches, where no light has ever walked. Because what the ocean forgets, it does not erase, it buries. And what it buries, it waits to offer again. So ends this chapter, beneath the tide of ancient hush. But the silence is not over. Some truths do not surface. They dissolve. And, from that dissolution, the sky began to breathe. Before there was air, there was pressure. Before there was blue, there was haze. The sky above early Earth was not a sky at all. It was a shroud, a thick veil, of gases and grief, drawn over a planet, still cooling from its birth. There was no sunrise, no clarity, no stars, only vapour, only shadow, only the muffled breath of a world trying not to collapse. It is hard to imagine a sky with no light, a sky with no wind, a sky with no wings to cut through it. But for billions of years, the atmosphere was not something to fly through. It was something to survive, composed of volcanic size, methane, carbon dioxide, ammonia. It clung to the planet like a fevered dream. The air was heavy, with things unformed. Not poison, not yet, but not promise either. A liminal sky, a sky that waited not for life, but for a shift, for the slow, relentless rise of breath. Oxygen did not arrive with drama. It was not a gift. It was a consequence of cells finding energy in light, of photosynthesis, whispered by cyanobacteria in quiet ponds and sunlit shallows. Tiny, unseen workers, busy with bonds, careless of history. They had no lungs, no minds, but they changed the world, not with noise. With patience, they filled the sea first. Oxygen met iron. The ocean rusted red and sank its burden to the seafloor. Only then did oxygen rise, and the sky, so long sealed in shadow, began to breathe. Not in gusts, not in thunder, but in a gradual lightening, a lifting of the veil, a remembering of what the stars once looked like. Still, it took time. Even oxygen must learn to settle. For a long while, it danced only in the high places, a guest, not a host. The rest of the sky remained strange, thick with nitrogen, haunted by the breath of earlier worlds. But something had changed. The sky, there was no longer waiting. It was becoming. And when it became, when the oxygen reached a threshold, the earth had never known. Fire was born. Not the fire of volcano or lightning, but fire as we know it. Combustion, flame fed by air. It is a quiet irony. The very breath that made life flourish also made it flammable. The sky became both cradle and threat. With oxygen came ozone, a thin shield, woven by sunlight, from the molecules of breath, and with it, the most delicate change of all, protection from the harshest ultraviolet rage of the young Sunday. The sky became a roof, not perfect, not safe, but enough for life to dream of land. We often think of atmosphere as emptiness, as a gap between ground and star, but it is not empty. It is memory, unfolding upward, each layer a page, written in different temperatures, Different densities, different tales. The troposphere, where clouds now walk. The stratosphere, home to ozone's quiet watch. And above them, thermosphere, exosphere, edges not of sky, but of escape. Borders where air thins, into spaces whisper. The sky is not one thing, it is many silences, stacked on top of each other, each one waiting to speak. In the early days, the sky did not echo. Sound was swallowed by density. There were no birds to pierce it, no thunder to test it. It was a silent column pressing downward. And yet, within that pressure, molecules began to move, not randomly, but rhythmically. Wind was born, not as breeze, but as balance. The need for high and low to trade places. The earth, turning slowly under its atmosphere, began to stir its own breath. Clouds came next. At first, not in the shapes we know, not sheep across a blue field, but dense curtains of moisture and gas, weaving shadows over the crust. And then, as the atmosphere thinned, they began to drift, to scatter, to float. And with floating came rain. And with rain came erosion. And with erosion came memory. Because rain is not just water, it is return. It is sky, remembering ocean. It is air, giving back what it borrowed. And each drop, falling onto stone, writes something down. Even now, the first blue sky was not bright. It was pale, tentative, rarely scattering. The dance of light through air molecules only begins when air is clean enough to let light through. It was not just chemistry, it was clarity. And clarity, in the history of Earth, is rare. So when the sky turned blue, the planet changed. Not just in look, but in posture. It had been inward, shielded. Now it opened. And in that opening, light was no longer a threat. It became an invitation. But the sky had waited long, longer than the crust, longer than the tides. It had waited to become breath, to become shelter, to become the canvas on which clouds could write their endless, vanishing poems. The sky is still writing, and sometimes, on a quiet morning, or in the hush before a storm, you can feel how long it waited, and how patiently it continues to hold us between the stars we cannot reach and the ground we barely understand. The sky is not the opposite of the sea. It is its sibling, formed from the same breath, divided only by direction. One fell, one rose, but both belong to the planet's longing to hold, to cradle, to wrap itself in something larger than rock. We think of the sky as the domain of flight, but for most of Earth's history, nothing flew. There were no wings, no feathers, no insects trembling through the wind, only gases, only molecules drawn upward by heat, then falling back like tired thoughts. The atmosphere was not a highway, it was a tide. It ebbed and flowed, not in days, but in epochs, and for billions of years, no one watched it change. Still, it changed. Oxygen spread like rumour, not in uniform sheets, but in tendrils, in pockets, in whispers passed from pond to pond. And as the air shifted, the world shifted with it. Rocks began to oxidize. Iron reddened. Sulphur soured the clouds. Storms changed shape, and light, for the first time, began to matter. Sunlight had always been there, but before oxygen, it could not reach. The haze was too thick, too hot, too private. But as the atmosphere cleared, sunlight poured through, not as blessing, but as test. Ultraviolet rays struck the surface, struck the ocean, struck the fragile molecules, beginning to build life. Some shattered, some survived, some learned. Photosynthesis bloomed, cells grew walls, DNA wrote itself with borrowed photons. This is what made the sky, not just air, but archive. It became the keeper of what life needed, but could not hold. Ozone absorbed the worst, clouds filtered the rest, and beneath this growing canopy, the earth began to imagine complexity. But the sky did not shape life alone. It responded to what life became. When trees came, they breathed out more oxygen. When vast forests fell and decayed, they trapped carbon. When continents shifted, they changed wind. The sky is not separate. It is responsive. It is the mirror, held above the earth, changing as the world below it does, and it has moods. There were times when the sky nearly turned against what it cradled. The snowball Earths, periods when the planet froze, from pole to pole, ice creeping into every shallow sea. The air grew thin, the clouds dimmed, the breath of life grew faint. But still, beneath the ice, in the deep dark sea, the vents whispered, and the sky waited again. Waited for fire, waited for thaw, waited for the earth to begin remembering itself. Then came the Cambrian, sudden blooming, explosions of form and limb and eye, and above it all, for the first time, a sky that could be seen as blue. Not always, not everywhere, but often enough that life learned to look upward, not just to seek light, but to seek meaning. Birds had not yet come, but the atmosphere had already grown into a theatre. Light scattered, rainbows happened, lightning found the courage to strike, and thunder became the first voice that echoed across the land. The sound of thunder was not just weather, it was punctuation, a mark in the air that said, here is force, here is breath, here is reminder. That above everything is a shifting sky made of borrowed time. And in that sky, the carbon moved, in and out of clouds, down through rain, back up through breath. The carbon cycle is not a diagram, it is a memory loop. Everything the earth exhales, it eventually takes back. And the sky is the lungs. When volcanoes roar, they paint the stratosphere with ash. The sky changes colour, it mourns. When forests burn, the clouds hang heavy with loss. When plankton bloom and die by the billions, the sky notices, not with eyes, with weight, with balance, with breath drawn differently on quiet days. The sky is not passive, it's a conversation, written in pressure, and wind is how it speaks, not to us, to itself, across valleys, over oceans, through canyon and cliff. Air is moved, like thought, sometimes soft, sometimes screaming, but always with intention, always with memory. There are particles in the air you breathe right now that once floated over dinosaurs, that once rode the breath of ancient trees, that once spun inside the lungs of stars. Because the sky never empties, it only circulates, it only transforms, it only folds time into itself. So when you look up, you are not looking at height, you are looking at history, layered in invisible sheets, folded in moisture, lit by photons that have travelled years to find your eye. You are looking at the oldest waiting place this world has ever known, the place that held its breath for billions of years before it could become breath itself. The sky is not blue. That is just how light settles into memory. The sky is not above. It is around. It touches everything, even the ocean floor, in ways too slow to see, even the deepest cave in the weight it bears, even you in the silence between each inhale. That silence, it belongs to the sky, and the sky, after all this time, still waits for the next breath, waits for the next beginning, waits for the next storm, to write its name in cloud, not for us, not for history, but because waiting is its oldest song, and some songs never end. There is a place where the sky becomes space, not in a line, not in a border you can cross, but in a thinning, a fading, a quiet subtraction of air, of sound, of pressure. It's called the Kármán line now, a name drawn in theory, not in cloud, but the sky does not know this name. It doesn't mark the place where flight becomes fall, where lift surrenders to orbit. It simply continues, thinner, colder, more silent, until there is nothing left to carry. Only drifting, only starlight. In the beginning, Earth had no such threshold, no stable skin to hold its gases. Solar wind, a constant scream from the young sun, could have stripped it bare, but the planet had a shield, a gift from its molten, spinning heart, the magnetosphere, a silent guardian woven from iron and motion, invisible, yet absolute. It caught the worst of the solar rage, bent it, deflected it, tamed it into auroras, and in doing so, it allowed the sky to stay, allowed air to gather, allowed molecules to remain, allowed pressure to build, and clouds to form, and breath to begin. Even now, the aurora speaks of that protection. Green and violet rivers, flowing across polar, dark whispers of the sun's fury, being cradled by Earth's field. These lights are not decoration, they are negotiation, a dance between star and stone, between flare and field, a reminder that the sky is not alone, that even in its silence it is held. And what of the wind? Wind began not as force, but as imbalance. The sun warmed one place more than another. The air moved to equalize what would never be equal. And thus, the first breath, not from lungs, from land and sea. Wind is the dialogue between hot and cold, between stillness and stirring. And over time, it learned to sculpt. It carved sand, shaped dunes, lifted seeds, and scattered them. Wind became the earth's soft hand, and the sky its gesture. There are places on this planet where wind has never stopped, where air moves with such rhythm. It becomes a clock. In deserts, in polar storms, above the jet stream, the sky does not need silence to be sacred. Sometimes its noise is devotion. And yet, there are also places where air barely stirs, in caves, in trenches, on still, grey mornings, where breath feels thick and time feels paused. These are sky's meditations, not its absence, its inwardness. Weather is how the sky feels, but climate is how it remembers. The atmosphere holds every eruption, every exhale of forest, every frozen age. It keeps score, not in days, but in isotopes, in trapped bubbles, inside glaciers, in the tilt of ancient trees buried in peat, in the patterns of pollen that drifted before we were born. And now, in our time, we change the sky. We burn ancient breath. We release carbon, drawn down in forgotten epochs. We thicken the air, not with warmth, but with memory. We don't understand. The sky is listening, not with judgment, with record. It will not punish. It will respond with heat, with flood, with hunger, but also with balance if we allow it. The sky, after all, has always adapted. It is we who must learn to listen, because the sky does not end. It circles. The air we breathe now was once in the lungs of creatures long vanished. Dinosaurs, woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats. It passed through them, then the soil, then the trees, then us. It is the same air, never new, only returned. And when we sleep beneath the sky, it does not sleep. It moves. It shifts. It writes. Clouds become symbols. Storms become sentences. And we, with our breath, our warmth, our waking, are written into it, not with ink, with vapour, with sigh. Even now, in the upper atmosphere, there are ribbons of wind that never stop, jet streams, constant rivers of motion circling the planet like a crown. They move faster than weather, faster than change. They carry birds, balloons, ashes from fires on one continent to another. They are the sky's circulatory system, and like all systems, they remember what passes through, and what passes through is everything. Smoke, dust, breath, prayer, sound, light, radiation, regret. The sky holds it all, and never once asks to be thanked. So when we look up from city streets, from desert sands, from mountaintops wrapped in mist, we are looking not at something above, we are looking at something within. The sky is not high, it is near, closer than thought, older than fear, softer than forgetting, and it is still waiting, waiting for balance, waiting for breath, waiting for silence to return, not to erase, to remember, because memory was always the sky's first shape. There are clouds, so high, so thin, they do not move. They shimmer above weather, above storm, above time. Noctilucent clouds, they're called night shining, threads of ice, glowing at the edge of space. They are not common, they are not loud, they appear only under the right coldness, the right absence, the right whisper of dust from below, and when they do, they are the sky, remembering silence. Before all things flew, the atmosphere was untouched. Nothing pierced it, nothing patterned it. But now, migrating birds slice its winds. Jets etch their thin white scars. Satellites skim its upper reaches, like thoughts trying to escape memory. We have turned the sky into a pathway, but it has not stopped being a sanctuary. It still folds each sunrise into the same gold, still lets every moon carve its soft circle through cloud and quiet. It still darkens with dusk, not because it must, but because it has always known how to fade, and fading is a kind of grace. There are places on Earth where the stars vanish, not from the sky, but from view. Places where haze and heat fill the atmosphere with light that does not belong. Light pollution, they call it. A new fog, a forgetting of the night. But high above, the stars still burn, still hum their silent stories. They wait. The sky waits. And some nights, when the wind clears, when the air forgives, they return. It is strange how the air remembers what the ground forgets. A volcano erupts, the land reshapes, but the sky carries its ash around the world. And for years, sunsets blush in colours no painter could invent. The sky does not hold grudges. It holds impressions. It does not rewrite. It traces each storm, each season, each brief appearance of comet or eclipse. It gathers them all, as if memory were its truest purpose. In Tibetan texts, the sky is called the Great Mirror, not because it reflects us, but because it reflects nothing. And in that nothing, everything appears. There are gases in the air we never feel: neon, argon, trace amounts of krypton and xenon. Noble gases, they're called unaffected, unreactive. They drift through time, unchanged, like ancient watches, carried in wind. The sky keeps them, tucked between breaths, like secrets it knows we'll never need, but still it holds them, just in case. The boundary between atmosphere and space is not a wall, it is a blur. Some molecules escape, they drift into vacuum and are lost. Some fall back, drawn by gravity's soft hand. There is no judgment, only motion, no fear, only distance. And the sky, as always, makes room. Even time moves differently here. The upper layers, mesosphere, thermosphere, stretch so wide that sound cannot cross them. A storm there might pass unheard. Only temperature changes, only pressure shifts. Even silence is stratified, and in that silence, the earth listens to itself. Somewhere tonight, a thunderhead climbs, 6 miles high. Inside it, lightning forks and folds. Like nervous thought, the sky does not stop it, does not tame it. It simply holds the charge until it can be returned. This, too, is love. Not control, not interference, but containment. The ability to let something pass through you without breaking. The sky is fluent in this. For billions of years, it has held our breath, our heat, our dreams of flight. It has held our dust, our ashes, our prayers whispered into wind, and never once has it refused us. So when we look up, not to measure, but to wonder, we are not just seeing distance, we are seeing patience. We are seeing the long blue quiet that waited for life to bloom, for breath to begin, for silence to end and begin again. Because the sky is not destination, it is memory. It does not ask to be crossed, only seen. It does not ask to be held, only noticed. It is the hush before voice, the pause after song. It is the place where forgetting stops and becoming begins. And if you listen closely, on a windless evening, beneath stars not yet drowned in city glow, you might hear it breathing, still, always. The sky, that once waited too long, waits still, but not for arrival, for return. And so we close this chapter in the arms of air, where molecules move like memories, and silence still holds the shape of what came before. But even sky cannot hold everything. Some things fall, some things fade, some things sink, and beneath it all, something older waits. The moon was not always there. The sky was once alone, unaccompanied, untethered. There was no glow, no pull, no tide, just earth, turning in silence, wrapped in fire and vapour. And then, a collision, not loud. There was no air yet to carry sound, but immense. A planet-sized impact, hot and raw and blind. A glancing blow from a body called Thea, or something like it, long since lost to myth. What followed was not ruin. It was orbit. From molten debris, drawn by gravity's grief, the moon was born, not placed, not set, forged. Not above Earth, but from it. Part of the same wound, part of the same memory. And the Earth, bruised and reeling, gathered itself again, spun faster, tilted slightly, breathed out new gases from its wounded crust. And above it, the moon circled, closer then, much closer. Not the calm companion we know now, but a looming, molten ghost, a child of violence, learning how to stay. It did not shine then, it reflected nothing. The sun could not yet break through the haze. It hung in the ash-thick sky, like a memory, too bright to forget, too recent to name. And Earth, still covered in restless oceans, began to feel the pull. Not metaphor, not poetry, force. The moon reached, and the water answered. Tides were not gentle. They were not clocks. They were upheavals, walls of water, sweeping across the young seafloor, twice a day, every day, relentless, rhythmic, like breath, too heavy for lungs. The moon moved the oceans before life ever stirred within them. It taught the water how to reach, how to fall, how to forget its shape. Because every tide is a kind of amnesia. The sea does not remember where it was. It only goes, then returns, then goes again. And with each pull, the moon carved, not just coastlines, but time, slowing the Earth's spin, bit by bit, year by year. Days grew longer, not suddenly, but inevitably. The moon was not just orbiting, it was teaching the planet how to pace itself, how to rest. We now have 24-hour days, but once they were shorter, 15 hours, 12, less. The moon stretched time, not like a clockmaker, like a mother smoothing the covers of a restless child. Even now, she drifts away, 4 centimeters a year, soft, steady abandonment. But the pull remains, and the sea still listens. Tides shape everything, even what we cannot see. They slow the Earth's core. They guide migrations. They lift nutrients from the deep to the light. They carve cliffs and scatter salt. And all the while, they forget. This is the nature of a tide. To arrive, to alter, to leave, as if it never touched anything, but it touched everything. And in its forgetting, it writes, not with permanence, with erosion, with absence. The moon is the author of this vanishing. She pulls, and releases. She speaks and withdraws. She does not explain. She does not remember. And so, neither does the water. Somewhere in the Pacific, a wave moves toward shore. It has travelled for hours. It will spend itself on rock and sand, and then it will return as if it never existed. But the rock remembers. The sand remembers. They wear their memory, like smoothness, like shape. There are creatures born to this forgetting, crabs that live in moon-synced rhythm, corals that spawn only at the full tide, worms and snails and fish that ride the rise without thought. They do not know the moon, but they obey her. Because obedience is not always fear. Sometimes it is trust. The moon has no atmosphere, no sound, no weather. She is silence, made round, and yet her silence shapes every shore. That is power, that is intimacy, without possession. Long ago, when life first reached for land, it did so in rhythm with the tide. Creatures crept into tide pools, got stranded, adapted, fins turned to limbs. In that in-between place, the sea gave them to the land, and the moon timed the giving. Every evolutionary leap came from water, losing memory of form, jelly becoming bone, fin becoming foot, breath becoming air. The tide washed away what was, and what remained learned to stand. So the moon, though distant, is part of every gesture, every heartbeat that aligns with the sea, every pause that feels like waiting, every goodbye that returns. Tides are not just water, they are grammar, the way the world pauses and then continues, the way it inhales and lets go, the way it learns to begin again without needing to recall the start. And the moon, she watches, she always has. Even now, she lifts the oceans in silence, moves them without memory, and in doing so, teaches us how to stay, by leaving, how to remember, by forgetting. The moon pulls, but the earth pulls back. This quiet struggle, this dance of reach and resistance, shapes not just the oceans, but the crust itself. Tides move rock, not quickly, not visibly, but enough. The solid earth bulges, just slightly, beneath each lunar pass. It rises by inches. It lowers again. The land, too, breathes. We do not notice, but the earth does. It creaks. It sighs. It yields. And in those subtle shifts, faults adjust. Mountains settle. Magma stirs. Tides are not only ocean, they are beneath us. Always a hidden rhythm, beating through stone. The moon is drifting. We know this now. 4 centimeters farther each year, measured in laser beams and mirrors, left by astronauts long ago. But the moon does not rush. She is slow by design. She leaves like a tide herself, not vanishing, just moving toward distance. So slowly that love turns into myth. Once she was 10 times closer. Once her presence filled the sky, like a second sun. Imagine that. A horizon filled with her shape, her brightness, her gravity. The tides then would have risen dozens of feet, not in gentle waves, but in planetary pulses. And still, life emerged. Not in spite of her chaos. Because of it, because the pull was steady, because the forgetting was patterned, because even violence can be a kind of lullaby if it happens slowly enough. Today, our tides are modest, but they still move. They stir the plankton. They lift the kelp. They signal to salmon when to swim upstream. They whisper to coral when it's time to glow, to spawn, to let go. Whole ecosystems move to the moon's breath, not because they think, but because they remember without needing to remember. That is instinct. That is trust. That is tide. In the Bay of Fundy, the water rises and falls by more than 50 feet each day, not because the moon loves it more, but because the shape of the bay catches the tide, like a hand cupped to receive. That is how tide works. It's not just the moon. It's the Earth's willingness, the curve of a coast, the depth of a sea, the echo of past shorelines. These things shape the pull. Gravity invites, but topography responds, and from that dialogue, the tide is born. There are tides in the atmosphere, in magma, in the very crust of the Earth. Even the sun pulls, not as strongly, but enough to nudge, enough to remind. Tides are not just movement, they are participation, the willingness to be moved by something you cannot touch. And what about memory? Tides forget by nature. Each wave overwrites the last. Each crest replaces the one before. But forgetting is not absence. It is surrender. It is letting go of the moment to make space for the next. The ocean does not archive. It erases, and in that erasure, it reveals what cannot be erased. Rock, cliff, bone, the things too stubborn to vanish, are shaped by the things that never stay. That is how the tide teaches. Even language borrows from the moon. The word month comes from her cycles. The rhythms of blood, the timing of seed and harvest, the old rituals woven into tide and phase. Every calendar began with her light, not the Sunday. The moon was the first keeper of time, not because she illuminated, but because she changed, consistently, predictably. The first pattern the earth could trust. And so we learned to wait, to watch, to count the spaces between crescents, to let the sea draw back without panic, knowing it would return, knowing it would forget where it had been, and that this was beautiful. There are animals who time their births to the highest tides, so their young will be carried safely into the deeper sea. There are birds who feed only when the tide recedes, who find their sustenance in the brief memory of the ocean's absence. Life is shaped not by the tide's arrival, but by the rhythm of its loss, and the moon watches, still, always. She does not intervene, she does not mourn, she keeps time. By pulling, she holds nothing, only influence, and even that, she lets go. Each tide is a message sent to no one. Each wave is a sentence, never finished, but together they form a language, a grammar of forgetting, a poetry of return. The moon will continue drifting, the tides will continue slowing. Eventually, Earth's rotation will match the moon's pull. There will be no more tides, no more waves. The oceans will sleep, but not yet. For now, they rise, they fall, they forget, and they begin again. Because memory is not always the act of holding on. Sometimes it is the grace of letting go. And tides. Tides have always known how to let go beautifully. Not all tides move water. Some move light, the moon's reflection on the surface of the sea. Rises and falls too, a silver ripple, a gentle echo of a body so distant. It should not matter, and yet she shapes the world without ever touching it. This is what gravity does when it becomes quiet. It persuades, and the ocean, drawn by nothing more than nearness, yields. Even the stars feel tides, not like water, not like wind, but in their cores, their fusion, their balance. Gravity pulls, and plasma pushes back. A constant negotiation between collapse and expansion, a celestial tide, and we, creatures of earth, born of ocean, shaped by moon, carry echoes of that same balance in every breath. Tides do not seek stillness, they seek return. There is no end, no shore that says, enough. Only rhythm, only the pull, only the forgetting, and the becoming again. In the mangrove swamps, trees grow with roots that breathe in rhythm with the tide. Their roots drink salt, then wait for fresh. They do not resist. They sway. They survive, not in spite of the tide, but because of it. There are shells on ancient cliffs that once rested on seafloors, now miles above the ocean. Fossils of tide's old fingers left behind as the earth rose and the water stepped back. The sea does not remember these heights But the cliffs do. They remember the weight, the salt, the ceaseless polishing of wave upon stone. And yet, even stone forgets, in time. What cannot forget are the patterns, not in things, in movement, the slow cycling of tilt and orbit, of wobble and wobble again. Milankovitch cycles, they're called now. Long rhythms in Earth's motion that govern ice ages, currents, climate. And beneath all these grand patterns is the moon's quiet hand, not in control, but in presence. She doesn't command, she invites, and the Earth responds. With water, the moon has no life, no plate tectonics, no air, but she has dust that has never been moved except by impact or footprint. She has craters, older than multicellular life. She is stillness, remembering violence. She is silence that shaped every wave. And still, she is becoming, even now, her face is not finished. Micrometeorites etch her slowly. Solar radiation peels away atoms, and the Earth's own gravity tugs at her center. We are bound, the two of us, not by sight, but by force, by what cannot be seen, by what never speaks, by what moves everything. The tide teaches this. That transformation can be quiet. That influence can be soft. That return is not weakness. It is rhythm, and rhythm is the oldest form of memory that does not need remembering. Somewhere, a horseshoe crab moves with the tide, its shape unchanged. For hundreds of millions of years, it crawls ashore, not because it knows, but because the moon tells it without speaking, and it listens without questioning. Tides are not plans. They are invitations. They do not build. They allow. They do not decide. They offer. And this, perhaps, is the lesson beneath it all, that not all power is in permanence. Some power is in returning, in the willingness to forget just enough to begin again. There are tide clocks, old instruments built by sailors and monks, turning slowly on walls to show the sea's next breath. They are not accurate. They do not need to be. They are not about precision. They are about rhythm, about listening to what never asks to be heard. The ocean does not count its tides. It does not tally its arrivals. It simply moves. It simply waits. And the moon, unblinking, unwarming, waits with it, not above, beside, not leading, accompanying. You can stand by the sea and watch the water rise. Watch it creep past your ankles, then retreat, like it forgot why it came. And it did. That's what tides do. They move forward, with all the strength of gravity, then forget, then withdraw. And in that cycle is everything. Breath, birth, loss, return. Erosion is just memory, written too often, on the same page. And the tide is the pen. The moon will keep pulling for as long as she can, until she is too far, until Earth spins too slow, and then the tides will stop, not with drama, with stillness, and the ocean, left without rhythm, will find a new way to move. But that day is far. Tonight, the tide still comes. It forgets. It returns. It forgets again. And in that forgetting, it teaches the Earth how to change without leaving. Because sometimes memory is too heavy, and the sea knows how to carry weight without holding it, how to be shaped without breaking, how to come home without needing to know the way. There is a silence just after the tide retreats, a stillness so complete even the wind forgets how to speak. The shore glistens, not with celebration, but with absence, with the soft shimmer of what is no longer there. This is where tide leaves its offering, not in shells, not in driftwood, but in space. It makes room, and that, more than the water, is what the tide gives. Room to begin again. We speak of the moon as constant, but she is not. Her face changes nightly. Her path shifts minutely. She is not static. She is repetition, refined. The tide does not rise in the exact same place. every time. The waves do not return in the exact same way. They echo, they respond, they are memory, set loose. And in that looseness, a kind of freedom. The word ebb means to fall away, to recede, to soften, but it also means to fade with grace, to allow retreat without panic. Tides ebb not because they fail, but because they must, because holding too long would break the shape of what they are. There are lakes on this earth where tides do not touch, places untouched by the moon's distant pull. But even there, the wind stirs, the rain falls, the water moves. Tide is not limited to sea. It is the principle of return, of change without finality, of movement without destination. And there are tides in the body, the pulse, the breath, the rhythms we do not name until they falter. Our hearts beat to lunar timing in ways science still uncovers. Menstruation, hormone shifts, sleep itself. We are not separate from the sea. We are smaller echoes of its forgetting. The womb holds salt. The blood carries minerals, once born in ocean, and when we cry, we release the ocean again. Tears are not water, they are return. Even in death, the tide finds us. There are cemeteries carved by the sea, graves eroded by rising tides. The land remembers, only briefly. Then the ocean takes it back, not cruelly, not hungrily, but with the same rhythm that brought us here. There are islands disappearing now, not slowly, not quietly. The water rises, the tide grows bold, but this too has happened before. The earth has lost shorelines many times. The map has changed shape with every age. What is new is not the motion. What is new is how many of us have forgotten how to listen. The tide speaks, not in crisis, but in rhythm. It tells us the water does not belong to us. It never did. It lends itself, then takes itself back. And in between, we build sandcastles. There are old poems etched in rock by tidal hands, fossilized ripple marks, wave signatures, hardened into stone. They show us that the water once stood here, then left, that it sang here, then fell silent. These marks do not cry for return. They speak of presence and the grace of departure. Somewhere in a shallow bay, a school of fish turns, just beneath the retreating tide. They do not ask where the water goes. They follow. They let the moon guide their hunger, their sleep, their spawning. They do not resist forgetting. They swim within it. Perhaps this is the lesson, that to live in rhythm is not to remember everything, but to know what to let go of, what to release, what to return to without fear. The tide does not know where it has been, but the world it touches remembers. In the wet bark of mangroves, in the salt lines on rock, in the rhythm of breath beside open windows. And when we walk by the ocean, when our footprints vanish, with the next wave, we are not erased. We are invited to try again, to return, to become rhythm instead of shape. The moon watches, her face half shadow, half glow. She offers no answers, only pull, only patience, only presence. So consistent, we mistake it for stillness, but she is not still. She moves, and we move. She forgets, and we learn. She fades, and we begin again. This is how the chapter ends, with no conclusion, only motion, no memory, only tide. The sea retreats again, not to leave, but to allow the next wave to arrive. And so it comes, and so it goes. But what the moon pulled away, she has not taken, only borrowed, only turned. And in the quiet hush between waves, the silence holds what the water does not. Stone does not speak, but it listens. It listens to pressure, to time, to heat that arrives slowly and leaves even slower. And in that listening, it learns. Not like we learn, not quickly, not eagerly. Stone does not seek answers. It becomes them. There is a kind of mind in matter that endures, not a mind with thoughts, but with balance, with response, with patience so vast. It appears motionless, but motion is not the measure of mind. Deep in the earth, miles below the crust, there are crystals that grow for millennia, micrometer by micrometer, recording changes in temperature, in pressure, in mineral flow. Each layer a sentence, each impurity a pause, each fracture a question, half answered by time, and no one sees them. No eye, no light, no sound, only heat, only gravity, only memory, pressing inward. These stones do not forget. They can't. They hold isotopes that decay with exquisite precision, marking the passage of time in half-lives. They are clocks that do not tick. They are memories that do not fade. Uranium, slowly transforming into lead, tells us the age of Earth more clearly than any fossil ever could, not by appearance, by decay, by the quiet disassembling of identity. Even time has to let go. We call these processes geochronology, but the stones do not need our names. They know what they are, not with ego. With endurance, there is intelligence in the way granite holds its form beneath a mountain for 2 billion years. There is intelligence in the way basalt flows, then cools into columns, fractal and symmetrical, without error. There is intelligence in the alignment of crystals under unimaginable pressure, as if the atoms themselves remembered how to arrange their future. Not all thought needs speed, not all memory needs meaning. Some knowledge simply holds, and what holds does not need to explain itself. Stone feels stress. It accumulates strain. It shifts when thresholds are reached. It does not cry out. It fractures. The fault lines we walk along are records of where the earth changed its mind. Slowly, finally, irrevocably. And the mountains that rise from those breaks are not accidents. They are decisions. We do not think of rocks as alive, but they move, they bend, they react. Given enough time, even the hardest mineral will flow. Time is the solvent for all certainty. In the mantle, rock behaves like thought, slow, pulsing convection carrying heat from the deep heart of the planet to the crust above, not randomly, rhythmically, like breath on a timescale, so vast we only see the aftermath. Volcano, plate, quake, each a sentence in a language we barely recognize. But it is not foreign, it is ancient, and it is ours. We are made of stone, calcium in our bones, iron in our blood, silicon in our cells, elements that once rested in magma chambers, in sediment beds, in stars. The body remembers what the planet knew first. Stone teaches by remaining. It doesn't demand understanding, only presence. To touch a billion-year-old rock is to touch a thought held longer than species. To hold a pebble, worn smooth by glacial retreat, is to feel the passage of silence over silence. The desert knows this. Stone towers and arches, shaped not by hands, but by wind. And the wind, its only tool, is time. Each grain of sand, a word against the hardness. And yet the rock yields, not with defeat, with trust. In the caves, stalactites drip for centuries, one mineral-laden drop at a time. And from that patience, columns rise. It is not architecture. It is attention, unwavering, intimate, exact. And in that precision, the cave speaks, softly, in mineral, in weight. Some stones contain water, locked inside, for eons. And when released, they tell us what the sky was like before we could name it. These are not relics, they are records, bound not in ink, but in lattice, crystals that held what rain forgot. Elsewhere, deep in ancient mountains, are rocks that glowed with radioactivity long before life, learned to shield itself. They are still warm from within, still whispering decay, not dangerous, just honest. The earth keeps no journals, but it inscribes, it writes its memory into stone, not so we can read it, but so it will not forget itself. And if we listen, if we slow ourselves to the pace of magma, of pressure, of mineral patience, we might hear it, the deep, slow thinking of a planet that has never once stopped becoming. Because intelligence is not always knowing. Sometimes it is simply enduring. The mind of stone does not live in the surface. It sleeps below, miles down, in chambers where light cannot follow, where silence is not stillness, but compression, where every movement is measured in pressure, where every answer is heat. We imagine knowledge as something that expands, that spreads outward, seeking, explaining. But the knowledge of stone is inward. It condenses, it compacts, it folds into itself until nothing is wasted. Stone is not interested in proclamation. It endures, and in enduring, understands. There is a layer of earth called the lower mantle, hot, dense, slow. The minerals there change shape without changing identity. They realign, they become denser, they let go of forms that can no longer survive. This is not failure. This is adaptation in silence. This is evolution without witness. And even deeper still, the outer core, liquid metal, mostly iron, spinning, a dynamo. From this movement comes the magnetic field, a shield around the planet, strong enough to deflect solar winds and hold the breath of our sky. It is invisible, it is vital, and it is made of molten memory. That iron once drifted through space, born in supernovae, scattered across galaxies, drawn to this planet by gravity's slow hunger. Now it spins inside us. We are protected by the dreaming of deep metal. Some meteorites carry crystal patterns that could only form under extreme heat and infinite time. Widman-Stetton patterns, interlocking lines of nickel and iron, never replicated on Earth, geometric, precise, sacred. They are not decoration, they are memory, proof that even in the cold vacuum of space, stone can think in angles. And on this Earth, in its oldest corners, there are diamonds, born not in opulence, but in pressure, carbon arranged in perfect silence, beneath unimaginable weight, lifted to the surface by volcanic violence, but carrying within them the calm of deep time. They are not symbols of love. They are symbols of patience. They are what happens when the earth holds its breath for 1 billion years. And not all stone is ancient. Some is always becoming. Lava flows, like language, then cools into new grammar. Igneous rock, the first word, spoken by molten throat. Sediment, the memory of movement, compressed into story. Metamorphic, stone transformed by grief, reshaped by heat and weight, but never erased. These are not categories. They are moods. They are the emotional spectrum of the planet's inner life. To the Earth, rock is not obstacle. It is process. Mountains rise and fall, not once, but many times. Each peak, a sentence begun and buried again beneath erosion's slow hand. Yet something remains. In the folds of old ranges, in the crystals aligned by ancient tectonics, there is a logic so elegant we mistake it for chaos. But stone is not random. It remembers pressure as direction. It records heat as composition. It holds even the subtlest changes, shifts in mineral form, deformation twins, tiny ghosts of old earthquakes, etched in crystal. This is not metaphor, this is reality. Stone listens. There are stones, called zircons, tiny, almost invisible. Yet, inside them are traces of uranium that have decayed slowly into lead. Each zircon is a clock, each atom a second hand. From them, We know the Earth is over 4.5 billion years old. Not guessed, known, because the stone told us, and it never lies. Stone is never fast, but it is true. It does not exaggerate. It does not forget. It waits until we are quiet enough to hear it. And sometimes we are in deep boreholes where core samples reveal rings of sediment laid down before the first fish swam, in cave walls where mineral veins curve in slow spirals that trace the shape of a vanishing aquifer, in petrified forests where once living wood has been replaced, cell by cell, with silica, not destroyed, translated, life rewritten in the language of stone. There is intelligence in translation, in becoming without breaking, in learning how to hold what once moved. Even silence has texture if you press your hand against old stone. Even absence has shape if you trace the edge of fossil ripple marks on ancient seabeds. Even forgetting has memory if you listen to the spaces between layers, because stone remembers, not by holding on, but by being changed by what touched it. Pressure is not violence, it is inscription, and in that inscription, stone becomes something beyond matter. It becomes mind, a slow, unhurried awareness that never needs to explain itself. It is enough to hold heat, to carry trace, to fracture exactly when it must. So when you walk on stone, you are walking on thinking, on memory too deep for language, on truth too slow to rise quickly. You are walking on intelligence that never needed to be named. Not all memory is warm. Some memory cools, crystallizes, contracts, aligns. Stone remembers in order, in geometry, in angles that repeat with too much precision to be coincidence. Quartz, feldspar, mica, they are not just names. They are letters in the Earth's oldest language, a language not spoken but grown. Inside a single granite boulder are stories layered in millimeters, the rate of cooling, the chemistry of melt, the trace elements that tell where the magma came from. A single feldspar crystal can hold a memory of the pressure from a continent-wide collision. It doesn't know in the way we know. It contains, and containing is its own kind of knowing. The deeper you go, the slower it becomes. Stone teaches this too. That stillness is not lack, it is attention. At a speed we are too impatient to recognize. Sometimes the earth folds stone, not into mountains, but into thought. Look at a gneiss, banded, layered, twisted, each stripe a pressure wound, each colour a chemical verdict. It is not chaos, it is response. Metamorphism is stone listening to pressure until it cannot remain what it was, and becoming what it must. The slate under your feet was once mud, not just any mud, a basin's worth, pressed flat under eons of weight, transformed not by chance, but by commitment, a kind of loyalty to compression. It breaks in planes, so straight you'd think they were cut by hand, but they weren't. They were carved by memory. Obsidian, born from sudden cooling, holds no crystals. It is glass. It is forgetting made solid, not because it lacks form, but because it froze before form could grow. It is the result of speed in a world that usually takes its time. A volcanic exhale that forgot how to become rock. And still, it cuts with surgical precision, sharp as decision, dark as unspoken thought. Even lava, as it spills, remembers the slope it moves across. It thickens, or thins, based on where it flows. It keeps no diary, but its form is shaped by every surface it touched. That is how stone remembers, by becoming the shape of what held it. There are minerals that only form under exact conditions, perfect temperatures, precise pressures, rare chemistries. They do not guess. They wait. And when the conditions arrive, they grow, exactly as they must. And then they stop. They do not overreach. They do not extend beyond what is needed. There is wisdom in this, a restraint we might one day understand. Jade is such a stone, dense, fine-grained, nearly unbreakable, but its strength comes from texture, not hardness. Its fibers interlock like woven thought, microscopic threads of silicate braided in silence. When it fractures, it reveals nothing accidental, only alignment, gone as far as it could. There are stones that respond to light, that glow softly with phosphorescence, or change colour in ultraviolet. They are not doing this for attention. They are not performing. They are responding to energy, to photons, to a shift in presence. They were always this way, only now we can see it. That is how perception works. And within some stones are trapped bubbles of air, fossil atmospheres from long-lost epochs, a single breath from a time before flowers, before wings, before blood, held inside a gem no larger than a seed. What other proof do we need? That stone is not dead, it breathes. What we have forgotten. Even caves think in their own way, not with thought, with time. Every stalagmite is a journal. Each layer records rain and drought and soil chemistry from centuries ago. You could read climate from its rings, trace fire and flood through its calcium. The stone isn't reacting, it is collecting, not for itself. For whoever learns how to listen, that is the secret of the intelligence of stone. It is not reactive, it is patient. It allows the world to impress itself upon it, and then it holds the impression without judgment, without commentary, only precision. Stone is never dramatic. Even earthquakes, for all their violence, are the release of what the stone has been holding for too long, a pressure too great to contain, a truth that must be spoken, not in words, but in rupture. Even that, even fracture, is honest, and honesty is the closest thing to intelligence the universe offers. Not cleverness, not solution, but endurance, but clarity. There are places in the world where stones hum, subtle vibrations triggered by seismic waves, by tectonic shifts, by sounds too low for human hearing. These stones resonate like tuning forks. They do not sing, they hold the echo. They are instruments tuned to the planet's deepest breath, and they never fall out of key. So when you press your palm to the side of an old stone wall or sit upon a boulder, smoothed by glacier, or pick up a pebble from a dry riverbed, know that you are touching intelligence, not like ours, older, quieter, exact, a mind that never needed language because it was never separate from what it knew. There are stones that outlast stars, zircon crystals, tiny fragments, older than the moon, older than the oceans, older than any map the earth has ever drawn. Inside them, not stories, but ratios, not language, but time itself, counted in atoms as they decay from what they were into what they must become. They do not resist this. They do not grieve. They just change perfectly, quietly, as stone always does. And there are stones that remember loss, impact craters, worn down by erosion, filled by lakes, vanished beneath soil, but dig deep enough, and the rock below still holds the trauma. Quartz grains, shocked into new alignment, glass beads, formed by sudden heat, isotopic anomalies that mark the moment. The sky came down. The surface forgets. The stone does not. Even absence leaves a trace in stone, a missing element, a fault line, a layer that shouldn't be there, or should be, but isn't. And so geologists learn to read the gaps as clearly as the grain. What's not there is part of the story too. There are places, called unconformities, layers of rock that sit atop each other with millions of years, missing between them, not eroded, just gone. As if the planet turned the page and forgot to write the middle. Stone doesn't fill in the blanks. It holds the blankness itself. It makes space for the unknown. And this is a deeper kind of intelligence. Not one that seeks to know everything, but one that allows for not knowing. That accepts interruption, fracture, silence. That understands. Some things are too vast for explanation. Even crystals, in their symmetrical pride, grow with flaws. Tiny inclusions, trapped bubbles, streaks of foreign atoms. These are not imperfections. They are autobiography, evidence that even perfect systems are shaped by the world around them. That even order holds interruption. To study stone is to study patience. The patience of sediment layered in the hush of an ancient sea. The patience of lava cooling into basalt, one breath at a time. The patience of a mineral forming slowly in the dark, with no witness but temperature, and the patience of the earth itself, shifting, grinding, folding, all without asking to be seen. Sometimes we cut stone. We polish it, hold it up to the light. In that moment, the inside is revealed. Not beauty, not magic, just memory held so tightly for so long. It becomes light. And sometimes we carve into stone, petroglyphs, temples, tombstones. We etch our names into what cannot be erased, hoping that something so solid will remember us. But the truth is, it already does. Before the chisel, before the word, the stone was already listening. You do not need to write on stone to be remembered by it. You only need to touch it, to walk across it, to shape it, however slightly. The earth records everything, not to hold us accountable, just to hold us. There are stones deep underground that hum with faint energy. They are not alive, but they are not dead either. They are the in-between, the waiting, the quiet alertness of matter that never forgets how to respond. When the time comes, we think of thought as fast, but fast things forget. Stone remembers, because it is slow, because it refuses to be rushed, because it knows that time is not a race, but a shape, and memory is not a flame, but a fossil. So when you stand at the base of a mountain, carved by wind and glacier, you are standing in the mind of the planet, not metaphor, reality, a mind made of silicate, of iron, of feldspar and olivine and mica, a mind that has never needed a heartbeat to feel change, only gravity, only time, only pressure and release. The earth is not thinking about us. It is thinking with us, through us. We are part of its process, part of its memory. Our bones, our cities, our glass and steel and plastic will all become sediment. One day, layered beside fossils and ashes, beneath lakes and dunes, and stone will not judge. It will just remember. And long after we are gone, long after every word has faded, every boundary erased, the stone will still be here, quiet, aware, enduring, a mind made not of neurons, but of becoming, a silence, not of absence, but of attention. This is the intelligence of stone. It does not answer. It absorbs. It does not speak. It shapes. It does not remember like we do. It becomes what it remembers, and what it becomes cannot be lost, only layered, only pressed, only waiting beneath our feet, beneath our histories, beneath our noise, where the earth still listens. There is a silence even stone cannot hold, a span of time, so deep, so dark, so dissolving that no memory survived it, no bone, no shell, no imprint of movement in mud, just the absence of evidence, just a blankness, measured in eons. We call it the Precambrian, a name for what came before record, before teeth, before exoskeletons left their shadows in limestone. It is not a gap, it is a continent of unknowing, a kingdom of vanishing, not because nothing lived, but because nothing that lived was built to stay. Fossils are not memory, they are coincidence. They require just the right death, in just the right place, at just the right time. They require hardness, they require luck. Before shells, before bones, before chitin or cartilage, life was soft, too soft to persist, too fluid to endure, and so it slipped between the layers, unwritten, but life was there. The oceans swarmed with forms unnamed, filaments, slimes, mats of microbial breath, stretching across shallow seas. Like silk, they built reefs before corals. They created oxygen before lungs. They were the architects of possibility, and they left almost nothing behind. A few hints remain. Stromatolites, layered rocks formed by microbial mats built one breath at a time. Some still live today in quiet tidal zones where nothing else competes. Others are ancient, fossils not of creatures, but of behavior, of growth, of presence, of gathering. And even they are rare, because the sea does not keep what is soft. The tide does not remember what it lifts. And so we name this time by what it lacks. No fish, no flowers, no footprints, just deep chemical breath, just waiting. But waiting is not nothing. It is preparation carried out in silence. The earth was not idle. The continents drifted, the atmosphere shifted, ice ages swept the globe, entire oceans frozen over, the planet wrapped in glittering stillness. And life, whatever it was, persisted in the cracks, in hot vents, in brine pockets, in shadows beneath the ice. Invisible, incredible. We call this time deep time, not because of its age, but because of its absence. No diary, no debris, only chemistry, only change, and change is the truest storyteller. There are places in the world where black shales form, layered sediment rich in carbon, laid down in oxygen-starved seas. These rocks are the shadows of vanished oceans. Within them, occasionally, we find shapes, not skeletons, not forms, but smears, ghosts of cells, carbon signatures, compressed into suggestion, evidence that something pulsed in the dark, something stirred and split and fed and faded. We do not know their names. We never will. They did not ask to be remembered. They only asked to become, and for a time they did. The Ediacaran biota, a final bloom before the Cambrian light. Soft-bodied creatures, petal-shaped, frond-like, resting in shallow seas. They lived without eyes, without mouths, perhaps without death, as we understand it. They appear in strange beds of ash and mud, preserved by accident, then vanish completely, as if they were only a dream the earth had before waking. Some say they were a failed experiment, others a necessary prelude. We do not know, and the fossils will not tell us, because most were never made. The vast majority of life has no record. It bloomed, it fed, it faded, and the earth turned, without a mark, but not without meaning. Because meaning does not require preservation. Meaning is carried forward, in lineage, in chemistry, in what survives, after all signs have disappeared. Even now, there are organisms that leave no fossils, bacteria, viruses, soft plankton that dissolve upon death. They are with us, around us, within us. And yet, millions of years from now, they may leave nothing. The fossil record is not truth, it is witness, and witness is always incomplete. There are minerals, deep in ancient rock, with ratios that suggest life. Carbon isotopes that lean toward the kind produced by metabolism. They are not fossils. They are fingerprints, smudges on the window of time. We press our faces to that glass and try to imagine what moved beyond it. But it is too dark, too far, too silent. Still, we try, because silence invites listening, and the absence invites wonder. And the fact that we are here at all means the forgetting was not complete. We carry their chemistry. We breathe their oxygen. We build our cells from the patterns they formed. Their memory is not in bone, it is in bond, and bond endures. So when you look into stone and see no fossil, do not assume emptiness. Assume awe. Assume a moment so brief, so beautiful, it could not bear to be held, and instead was lived fully. Then let go, because not every truth is meant to be recorded. Some are meant to be dissolved. There are oceans beneath the continents, not of water, but of forgetting. Buried beneath mountain roots, subducted into silence, lie entire worlds, never fossilized, never seen. And yet, they moved, they breathed, they built the scaffolding upon which memory would one day rest. Every fossil ever found is an exception, an accident, a death in the right kind of mud, a collapse beneath volcanic ash, a stillness that escaped the scavengers, the tides, the teeth. Most life disappears, not tragically. Naturally, the earth is not an archivist. It is a transformer. It does not preserve. It reuses. Before vertebrates, before hard shells, before anything had reason to resist decay, the world was full of softness, of living blurs, of bodies without outlines, melting back into sea within hours. How can we hold what refuses to hold itself? Some organisms today still live that way. They drift, they divide, they reform. Jellyfish, mats of cyanobacteria, slimes that pulse without organs. They are echoes of a time before form became memory. When life moved, without skeleton, without shadow, they teach us that presence does not always require permanence. In Namibia, in Newfoundland, in the outback of Australia, Ediacaran fossils emerge from rare beds of fine ash and silt, shapes like leaves, like fronds, like petals pressed into stone. Some are symmetrical, some ripple like soft flags. None have mouths, none have spines. We do not know how they ate, we do not know how they died, but we know they once touched sediment, soft enough to remember them, and then they vanished. The Cambrian came after. Explosion, they call it, an era of shells, claws, teeth, a sudden blooming of the visible. But it was not sudden. It was the revealing of what had already begun. The scaffolding had been there, invisible, soft. Now it took shape, in minerals and armor. But the mind of life had already awakened. In the silence, we think of fossils as relics, as treasures. But what of the lives they do not show? The countless generations that left no mark? Are they less real? Or are they more sacred for having passed? Without residue, there is humility in the unrecorded, a grace in the unpreserved. These early lives did not shape the land. They shaped possibility. They made the chemistry that would one day make skeletons. They built the patterns that would one day become memory. They were the blueprint beneath the bones. And bones, even bones, are rare. For every million creatures, perhaps one fossil, perhaps less. The rest return to sea, to soil, to silence. And yet, we live, proof that something endured, not as stone, but as lineage. Every cell in our body traces a line through those invisible ancestors, through the swimmers, without fins, through the feeders, without mouths, through the dreamers, without eyes. They are not gone. They are interior now. There is a molecule in our cells, ATP. It is the energy courier in nearly all known life. It predates bone, predates vision, predates fossilization itself. It has changed little, because it was right from the beginning. No record marks its origin. No stone holds its shape, but it is there, in you now. The silent worker, the ancient breath, still passed forward. That is how deep time speaks. Not in headlines, but in echoes, in patterns that persist when nothing else does. When the earth cools and warms and cools again, some things remain, not forms, not names, but functions, ways of being. That work. They get written into the invisible script of survival, passed on, even as the body forgets its shape, even as the earth forgets to fossilize. There are enzymes in modern bacteria that can survive at boiling temperatures. They live in hot springs, in ocean vents, in rock pores 2 miles below the crust. They have no bones, no faces, but they are among the oldest living things, and they do not fossilize. They persist. Not every story needs a page. Some are told in warmth, in rhythm, in the ability to keep waking up after every extinction. There were 5 great extinctions, perhaps more, events so cataclysmic the fossil record goes silent. But silence is not emptiness. It is transition. Something always remains. And from that remainder, life rises again. The Precambrian is not gone. It is inside everything. It is the stage upon which visibility was built. It is the soft breath behind the hard shell. It is the whisper beneath the shout of fossil. We are not built from what was preserved. We are built from what was forgotten. And so, when you hold a rock and find no imprint, no leaf, no limb, no trace, know that something once passed here. Something warm, something soft, something unrecorded. And that absence is not failure. It is the truest kind of memory. One that asks for nothing. One that gives without ever being named. In the folds of the earth, there are rocks, older than any fossil, untouched by the biology that came after. They lie quiet, beneath younger layers, unmoved, unmarked, not because nothing lived above them, but because what lived left no trace. There is a boundary in stone, called the Great Unconformity, a line, often sharp, where ancient basement rock meets much younger sediment. Sometimes 1 billion years are missing between them. Gone, not buried, not weathered away. Just not there. No fossils, no sediments, no record. Only absence. As if the planet paused its writing. As if time, for a moment, chose silence. We look at these places and call them mystery, but the earth does not owe us explanation. It does not archive for curiosity. It forgets, because forgetting is sometimes the only way to begin again. What causes such loss? Glaciation, uplift, erosion on a planetary scale, a world scraped down to its bones, wiped clean by time's rough hands, so that something new could grow. But even in that cleansing, something remains. The scars, the places where rock has been shorn by ancient rivers, the surfaces polished by vanished ice, the tilted strata that show where the earth exhaled. The earth remembers, not with fossil, but with posture, with angle, with fold, with the way one layer leans on another, like grief pressed into comfort. Fossils are bodies, but geology is gesture. Sometimes the gesture is survival. There are microbes entombed in rock salt, 1/2 mile beneath the surface, alive, not dormant, alive, sealed for hundreds of millions of years, feeding on sulfur, waiting in dark. They do not fossilize, they persist. Proof that life does not need to be remembered, to continue. It only needs space, and time, and silence. The fossil record is loud, with creatures that once ruled, ammonites, trilobites, dinosaurs. But they are the surface. Beneath them, always, was the quiet life, the microbial, the invisible, the life that never needed to be seen. And that life has never stopped. There are entire ecosystems beneath the seafloor, in the pores of basalt, in the cracks of ancient sediment, living, evolving, without fossil, without form that we would recognize. They are older than bone, older than thought, and they are still writing in molecules what history forgot to inscribe in stone. We measure time in rocks. We carve eras based on what we find. But most of time has no monument. It happened quietly, in the mud, in the heat, in the slow drift of cell to cell, over epochs too long for language. We find a single microfossil and rejoice. We forget that for every one preserved, 1,000,000,000,000 vanished, not lost, not wasted, just released, back into the cycle, back into breath, because the goal of life is not to be remembered. It is to continue, and to continue means to yield, to adapt, to vanish when needed, so something else may rise. Even now, in our own bodies, there are cells that live briefly, then dissolve. They do not fossilize. They function. They exist only as long as needed. Then they are replaced. This is not death. This is ecology. Of the body, of the earth, we have always come from what could not stay. We are built from the forgotten, from the things too soft to mark stone, but not too soft to shape the future. When we find no fossils in a layer, we do not say nothing lived. We say life escaped memory. We say the page was turned without ink, but the story continued. There is dignity in the unrecorded, grace in what does not remain. The world was built on these unseen lives, each one a brief gesture into form, each one a note in the song of breath that needed no audience. Even language must pause. Even story must allow for blankness, a space between paragraphs, a silence between notes, an absence where the weight of all that was can settle, and in that silence, beneath the sediment, beneath the shell, beneath the long chain of remembered form, there is something deeper, the first stirrings that never needed to be seen, only felt, only carried, only lived. So when you hold a rock with nothing in it, no fossil, no pattern, no trace, do not turn away. That is where the world began. That is where possibility was born, in a softness too sacred to survive, in a silence too perfect to speak. There are truths the earth chose not to write in stone, not because they were unworthy, but because they were complete, without record. Some stories don't need to be remembered, only lived, and then let go. There is no fossil of the first breath, no trace of the cell that first split with intent, the first hunger, the first division, the first reaching toward light. These did not harden into record. They moved, then dissolved, then moved again, and from that quiet motion, everything came. Not all beginnings announce themselves. Some unfold in shadow. Some are too fragile to survive the telling. We look for shape. We long for structure. But the oldest things had neither. The first lives were fluid, formless, more verb than noun. To try and fossilize them would be like trying to capture a flame in a mold. You would hold the outline, but not the fire. There is a fossil called a trace fossil, not the body, but the path it left behind, a ripple, a groove, a swirl of sediment where something moved, then vanished. Sometimes that's all we find, a sign that something passed through. No name, no face, just motion, and that is enough, because motion is memory too. So is chemistry, so is inheritance. Fossils are not the only way. Life speaks. Genes carry their own language. Enzymes, still catalyzing the same reactions, since before the sky turned blue, are living archives. Even silence, if you listen long enough, reveals a pattern. We carry in us the remnants of that soft beginning. Our cells still communicate using mechanisms from bacteria 4 billion years gone. Our mitochondria, tiny furnaces of energy, are descendants of ancient symbiosis, a moment of merger between lives, too long vanished to name. That merger left no fossil, only power, only continuation. That is the lesson beneath the missing layers. What mattered most did not leave a mark. It left a legacy. The fossil record is an outline, a sketch, a suggestion, but it is not the whole story. It is not even the beginning. It is what could be caught, what paused long enough to be held. But life never paused. It kept flowing, and in that flow, much was lost, but more was made. Imagine a world of shallow seas, warm and restless, scattered with microbial mats, stretching like fabric over stone, a world without bones, without blood, without eyes, only membranes, only division, only quiet hunger. We call this world primitive, but it was patient, and patience is the first intelligence. The Ediacaran creatures, those soft, strange dreamers, are not our ancestors, not directly, but they taught the world how to build toward form. They practiced presence before permanence, and when their time ended, they did not resist. They faded, they dissolved, but the possibility they shaped remained. It flowed forward into bodies that could fossilize, into bones, into us. We do not know what most of them look like, but we know that we are here because they were. That's enough. That's everything. Fossils give us shape, but the spaces between them give us mystery. And mystery is not emptiness. It is invitation to wonder, to listen, to imagine what silence was trying to say. So much of Earth's story was written in eras where paper did not exist, where the only ink was water, the only pen, change. We search the cliffs and sediments and stone-pressed strata for what remains. But sometimes the most sacred truths are the ones that passed through without a trace, like the breath before the word, like the darkness before the star. And so, the places where fossils could not reach are not absence. They are source. They are the space from which all shape emerged. They are not the forgotten. They are the ones who made forgetting a sacred beginning. And perhaps that is how all life begins. Soft, unseen, not yet hardened into permanence. It lives and changes and goes, not to vanish, but to become what comes next. To end this chapter is not to close it, because this part of the Earth's history has no border. It flows beneath all the others. It sings beneath the bones. It is the unseen structure holding everything above it, not with weight, with memory, not with fossil, with breath, and breath, after all, leaves nothing behind, except life. All land is a burial, not of the dead, but of time. Every continent is a palimpsest, written, scraped, rewritten, until only the pressure remains. What lies beneath our feet is not just stone, it is memory, folded in silence. Memory too old for fossil, too deep for story, but still there, still waiting. Continents do not rest, they carry. They hold what was pressed into them by collision, by eruption, by the slow grinding of plate against plate. They are vessels of ancient violence pressed flat into stillness. We walk above cities of stone we will never see, mountains buried, oceans subducted, landscapes ground to dust and sealed beneath newer crust. But they are there, not lost, not erased, only sleeping. The Himalayas rise each year, inch by inch, as India continues to press into Asia, but beneath them, deep beneath the peaks, lie fragments of a sea that once separated them, a quiet, vanished ocean called Tethys. Its sediments are trapped now in folded stone. Its marine fossils rest atop the world's tallest summits. the ocean is gone, but the earth remembers, in height, what was once depth. Elsewhere, in the heart of Africa, beneath the ancient craton, is land that has not moved. For over 3 billion years, the Karpval and Pilbara cratons are relics, not of events, but of resistance. They refuse to melt, refuse to drift, refuse to change. And in that refusal, they became time itself. They are not just foundations, they are witnesses. Beneath every continent, there is another continent, not in shape, but in age, in density, in memory. Cratons deep, stable keels of ancient rock that anchor the continents above them. They do not float, they root, they hold the weight of all that came after. Some of these buried worlds are broken, fractured pieces of supercontinents that drifted apart and were swallowed by newer crust. We call them terrans, fragments of old continents, sutured into new ones, foreign bodies in familiar land. They are the ghosts of ancient shores. Walk across the Appalachian Mountains, and you walk across 3 continents. The stones do not match. The minerals tell different stories. Once, these rocks were separate. They collided. They fused. They buried each other. And now they sleep together, in folded silence. The continents have buried not just other continents, but themselves. When plates crash, one sinks beneath the other. Subduction, descent, entire coastlines swallowed, cities of coral, volcanic arcs, islands, all pulled into the mantle. They melt, or not. Some remain, trapped, folded into the body of the earth, like forgotten dreams. And still, we find traces, xenoliths, foreign stones, trapped in volcanic rock. They rise from below, in magma's whisper, telling us what lies buried far beneath. Garnets that formed at impossible depths, peridotite from the upper mantle, stone pulled upward by accident, by pressure, by fire, and with it a message. What was buried never stopped becoming. There are diamonds in these buried places, crystals born under crushing weight. They do not form in coal, they form in silence, in depths too deep for roots, too dark for heat. And when they rise, they carry with them a map drawn in carbon, a cartography of pressure. In Siberia, in Canada, in South Africa, these old cratons bleed diamonds from wounds opened by ancient eruptions. They are gifts from the planet's buried self, not for beauty, for memory. And what of the secrets we cannot pull back? What of the crust, lost forever? To the subduction zones, it is not gone. It becomes mantle. It feeds volcano. It emerges again, in altered form, not as what it was, but as what it learned to become. The earth is not a vault. It is a cycle. What it buries, it transforms. And still, beneath the Andes, beneath the Alps, beneath the quiet deserts of Australia, there are landscapes we will never know. Mountains that rose and fell before vertebrates walked, basins that held warm seas, now sealed in metamorphic folds. The continents do not forget. They carry their past in pressure. They remember with heat. There are rocks beneath your feet that were once ash, falling on a forest 1 billion years ago. They do not speak, but they radiate the quiet hum of isotope decay. A clock ticking, not toward the future, but into the past. And when the plates move again, when continents shift and mountains fold and land is lifted once more, those buried truths will rise again, not as they were, but as stories made of pressure, of silence, of stone that never forgot. Some things the earth does not lose. It folds them, like pages in a book, too sacred to read aloud. The continent does not discard. It tucks away. What the mountains cannot hold, the mantle receives. What the rivers erase, the rock remembers, in layers, pressed beyond visibility. In geology, they call it subduction, one plate slipping beneath another, a slow descent into heat, into dark, into silence, not death, not disappearance, but deepening, a journey inward that lasts millions of years. We imagine the surface as the world, the land we walk, the sea we cross, but it is only skin. Beneath it, an archive, not of form, but of force, not of fossils, but of folding. Somewhere beneath the Pacific Northwest, the Juan de Fuca plate is sliding under North America, bit by bit, day by day. As it goes, it takes with it seafloor sediment, volcanic arcs, entire ecological histories. They vanish from sight, but not from process. They are reborn as magma, as metamorphic rock, as heat, and sometimes as earthquakes, because pressure does not vanish. It waits, it builds, it speaks, and when it speaks, the ground moves, not in anger. In memory, the shifting of a plate is the planet remembering what it buried, and what it buried cannot stay still. Even the quietest continents carry ghosts. In the heart of Greenland, in the shield of Canada, in the basement rocks beneath Scandinavia, are fragments of crust that once belonged to other worlds. Pieces of vanished supercontinents, Rodinia, Columbia, Nuna, names carved from silence. We map them not by borders, but by mineral fingerprint, by ancient magnetic direction trapped in cooling rock, orientation frozen, like a compass without a hand, still pointing to a pole that no longer exists. These buried continents whisper across oceans. South America speaks to West Africa. India remembers Antarctica. Australia carries pieces of long-lost Gondwana. Their stories are not written in lines. They are buried in the roots of mountains that no longer rise. And in between these buried lands, there are suture zones, faults where continents collided, welded together by pressure so great it fused stone into new forms. Serpentinite, blue schist, eclogite, rocks made only under extreme conditions, rocks that speak in the language of collision. They are not common, they are not loud, but they are honest. Beneath the Alps, the remnants of the Tethys Ocean still press upward. You can walk there and touch ancient seafloor lifted into sunlight. What was buried does not always stay buried. The earth exhales, and the past returns. In the core of every mountain range is a wound, a memory of force, a vertical tomb where stone rose, because it was caught between greater hungers. Mountains are not monuments, they are scars, elegant, sacred, unrepentant, and even they bury things. Within the Alps, beneath the Himalayas, inside the Andes, are the remains of rivers and lakes, of ecosystems that thrived, and folded under ice, under pressure, under time. We find them in metamorphic rock, not as fossils, as textures. Ripple marks turned to marble, mud cracks hardened into slate, the behaviours of vanished worlds, held in stone, that no longer remembers its softness. In northern Australia, beneath deserts older than trees, are impact craters, erased from the surface, but preserved below, melted quartz, shocked feldspar, traces of cosmic arrival, sealed beneath sediment, a buried sky. Because what lands does not always remain visible, but the earth still feels its weight. Somewhere beneath China, a hidden ocean waits, closed millions of years ago, subducted, folded into silence. But seismic waves passing through the mantle detect differences, materials that behave like ancient seafloor, proof that the ocean did not disappear. It was swallowed, and inside that swallowing, not loss, inheritance, because the earth does not let go. It transforms, and what the continents bury is not forgotten. It is metabolized. There are volcanoes that erupt rock formed deep beneath the crust. When those rocks rise, they bring stories, isotopic signatures of long-dead plates, minerals aligned by pressure beyond imagining. They are not explosive because they are angry. They are explosive because they are full. And the earth must release what it cannot hold. So we dig, we core, we scan with satellites and tremors. And every now and then we find them, the buried continents, the ancient sutures, the fossil shores, deep beneath farmland and freeway. They are still there, sleeping. And sleep in stone can last a very long time. To bury is not to forget. It is to protect, to hide, until the world is ready to know again. And the continents, ancient, patient, know this. They fold their truths inward. They carry them like bone carries marrow, quietly, faithfully, until pressure brings them back. Beneath every plain, beneath every mountain chain, beneath the places we call home, there are layers of earth the surface does not remember. Basins filled with the ruins of vanished rivers, salt domes pressed from oceans that dried before the first fern grew, coal seams made of forests, buried under their own breath, time compacted, life collapsed into carbon. We dig into these layers, not to learn, but to burn. We lift oil from the bones of ancient wetlands. We pull gas from shale beds that once held silence. But the earth did not preserve these things for our use. They are not fuel, they are memory. And memory, when misused, does not forget. The Permian extinction, the Great Dying, 250 million years ago, almost everything vanished. Volcanic eruptions flooded Siberia. The sky darkened. The oceans warmed. Methane surged. And what the earth could not bear, it buried. Whole ecosystems entombed in an instant. Measured by rock, we find them now in black layers. Thin, fractured, heavy with carbon. A scar beneath the surface. A warning, spoken in coal. But not all burial is tragedy. Some things descend to become more. Limestone becomes marble. Clay becomes slate. Sand becomes quartzite. These are not erasures. They are awakenings. Stone, reborn under pressure, not destroyed. Refined. The way grief becomes depth. The way silence becomes strength. In Norway, beneath the fjords, are rocks twisted by collisions. Older than fish. You can see their folds from space. Each one a wrinkle in time. Each one a breath held too long. They were buried in the roots of mountains that are long since gone, but their bones remain. And their story still warms the hand. Continents bury more than geology. They bury rivers, ancient paths, once carved by water, now sealed beneath lava or hidden under desert. We call them paleochannels, dead rivers. But they are not dead. They are waiting. Sometimes they fill again, not with water, with resonance, with the memory of movement. And when the rains return, the land remembers its shape. The water finds its way home. The continents bury lakes too, endorheic basins, closed, sunken hearts, where water gathered for a time and then was forgotten. Beneath the Sahara lies Lake Megachad, once the largest lake on earth, now gone, but its shores remain etched in dust, and beneath that dust, sediment, stories, seeds, traces of rainfall in a place that no longer believes. In green, burial is not always beneath. Sometimes it is within. In the cores of mountains are minerals that should not exist, rare combinations, only possible, under crushing heat. They are not natural to the surface, but they reach us when peaks rise from the fold. And when they do, we learn what pressure makes possible. Even culture has been buried, ruins swallowed by jungle and dune, temples forgotten by empire and time. But the earth remembers, not for glory, not for revenge. It keeps the shape of what we leave behind. A staircase, a foundation, a line of stone, aligned with stars. We no longer name. The continents carry us too. In the Arctic, beneath the permafrost, are mammoth tusks, still smooth to the touch. Flowers, still curled in the frozen soil. Pollen, still waiting to drift. They are not fossilized. They are paused, suspended in Earth's coldest breath, buried, not by weight, but by time itself, slowing down. Some things, once buried, should not be raised. Ancient pathogens, locked in melting ice, mercury sealed in silt, now stirred by warming seas. These are not memories, they are consequences. And the Earth, as always, offers them back, without judgment. Only gravity, only return. The land remembers where it cracked, where it bled, where it held. Even when we build, on top of that memory, it shifts. Cities rise on fault lines, bridges cross, forgotten floodplains, and the Earth gently adjusts, not to punish, to remind. There are stones in museums that were never meant to be lifted, that carry in their structure the weight of oceans, no longer here. We chisel them, label them, place them beneath lights, but even there they continue to hold what was pressed into them long before names. The museum is not the memory. The stone is, and some stones stay buried forever, too deep, too far, never touched by hand or eye, but they are still part of the planet's breath, still warming the mantle, still shaping the crust, still carrying the first days of Earth in their density. The continents do not speak, they shift, they release, they exhale heat from vents in the sea, they pulse upward in mountain ranges that rise inch by inch every year, and beneath all of it, they carry what we lost, what we used, what we forgot, and what we will become. Burial is not the end of motion, it is how motion becomes stillness, without stopping. The Earth folds, not to forget, but to contain, and beneath every step we take, beneath every field, every city, every mountain, there is a silence, carrying the shape of something that once moved. The deepest parts of the continents are not static, they drift within the mantle's slow swirl. Cratons, those ancient anchors, float on the asthenosphere, like thick ice on fire, stable but never still. Even the most buried truths shift eventually. There are places where the crust is thin, where the buried rise again. Hot spots, rifts, plumes of mantle heat, lifting pieces of old worlds toward the light. The land splits, new oceans begin, and from the wound, the past breathes upward, not as it was, but as lava, as steam, as basalt, cooling into new skin. Burial, too, is a cycle. What descends, rises. What melts, solidifies. What sleeps, one day stirs. The continents are not graves. They are lungs, inhaling time, exhaling memory. Even now, beneath the Antarctic ice, the Earth pulses. Volcanoes stir under miles of frost. Sediment slides through ancient valleys. Fossilized forests lie hidden, root and ring and leaf, beneath glacial silence. They are not lost. They are waiting. Waiting for warmth, for pressure, for return. The Earth does not believe in waste. What it cannot preserve, it transforms. And what it cannot hold, it buries until it can. In Western Australia, beneath the desert, beneath rust-coloured silence, lie zircons, older than any known crust, tiny crystals, fragments of the first land to ever rise, above the sea. They are not visible from space. They are not visible from the surface. But their chemistry tells a story. That long ago, before continents had names, before life had formed, the Earth knew how to build. And when those lands vanished, she tucked their memory into zircon's lattice and carried on. Burial does not protect from change, but it protects from haste. Time moves slower in the dark. Ideas evolve. Chemistry deepens. Beneath the surface, the world becomes, and when it returns wiser. There are stones we now touch that began their journey 2 billion years ago. Granites, born in deep chambers. Shields carved by ice. Gemstones twisted by crustal grief. They rose not quickly, but exactly. And in their rise, they carried with them all they had learned. In the dark, we build on these stones our homes, our temples, our roads, our names. But the stone is older than language, older than ritual, and still it carries us, not as weight, as memory. Every landmass is a layer, not just of geology, but of time, of breath, of burial, of return. When we dig, to plant, to mine, to study, we are speaking to the buried, and they are listening. Sometimes we find them a tool, a tooth, a layer of ash. Sometimes we find nothing, only silence. And in that silence, meaning, because what was buried was not just thing, it was change, and change leaves its own sediment. The earth's crust is not thick. We live on a skin, frail enough to crack, thin enough to shiver. And yet, beneath us lie oceans of memory, fossils layered into shale, magma rising from old wounds, continents drifting on forgotten edges. Like islands of sleep, we are never far from what came before. We are surrounded by it. We are built on it. The past is not behind us. It is below. It carries our weight. And still, it moves. Sometimes, in the silence of a cave, in the echo between two cliffs, in the low hum of a fault line, you can feel it. The depth, the density, the presence of something too vast to name, too deep to speak, but known, felt, endured. Because the continents are not just land, they are the memory of collision, of reunion, of burial, and all that they carry will one day surface again, not as it was, but as light, as heat, as shape. And what the continents buried, they never truly forgot. There is a place where time no longer moves forward. It settles beneath the crust, beneath the deepest roots of mountains, beneath even the memory of light. There is no direction, only temperature, only pressure, only sleep. This is not the core, not the furnace. It is deeper than heat, softer than fire. It is the dream. The crust is not a wall. It is a threshold, a membrane between what we call the world and what the earth calls home. Below it lies the mantle, slow, dense, mysterious, not because we know nothing, but because it never needed to explain. The mantle does not melt. It flows, a slow, solid churn, a circular breath lasting millions of years. It carries the warmth of the core, upward like thought, and in return, the crust sinks downward. Subducted plates, forgotten continents, lost oceans, folding into its dream. There is no map for this place, no fossils, no history, no light, only minerals, rearranged by gravity, only pressure, measured in silence. But silence, here, is not emptiness, it is knowing. This is where the planet listens to itself, where all that has risen, seas and shells and civilizations, returns in quiet procession, unburdened by identity. Stone becomes heat, heat becomes movement, movement becomes shape, and shape, eventually, becomes surface again. The mantle remembers nothing. The way we do, it remembers by recurrence, by repetition, by cycle. It holds no stories, only rhythms. It is the breathing earth, the part that never speaks, because it is too busy. Becoming, we call it asthenosphere, the soft layer beneath the rigid plates. But soft is misleading. It is soft, the way thought is soft, the way dreams are malleable but complete. Nothing here is random. It only seems so, because it takes too long to understand. This is where old plates go, to be rewritten, not erased, rewritten, with new chemistry, new pressure, new direction. They sink until they can no longer hold what they were, and then they change. We find hints of them in volcanic rock, fragments of crust that pass through this deep forgetting and returned as something else, recycled but never repeated. Even dreams do not return the same. Sometimes we call this layer the deep earth, as if it were far away. But it is not far. It is below, just beneath the crust, just beneath our stories, closer than sky, closer than memory. And it is dreaming still. Every mountain is a breath from it. Every earthquake, a murmur in its sleep. Every volcano, an eye opened briefly to exhale. We fear what is below, because we cannot see it, because it does not answer. But the earth has no need to answer. It has only to continue, and in its continuation, it tells us everything. All that we have buried, the bones, the bricks, the names, will return here, not to be judged, not to be kept, to be changed, to be warmed, to be welcomed into the slow motion of forever. The crust floats on this dream. It is fragile. It cracks. It shifts. But it floats because the mantle allows it to, not with support, with surrender, with heat, with the constant rising of what was once buried. The oldest parts of the crust ride on roots called keels, extensions of kratom that dip into the mantle like anchors. But even these are not untouched. Heat seeps upward, always, slowly, and even the most ancient roots begin to stir. Nothing is beyond the dream. Sometimes diamonds rise from this depth, crystals born 100 miles down, lifted by volcanic eruption, like thoughts too dense to stay hidden. They are not rare because they are rare. They are rare because the dream does not often let go. But when it does, what surfaces is perfect. So much has come from this deep place. The continents themselves, the oxygen we breathe, was made possible by crust created from upwelling mantle. It is the source of every land that has ever been walked. And still, we call it mystery, perhaps because it cannot be held, only felt in tremor, in fire, in silence, the kind of silence that hums. When a continent drifts, when a mountain rises, when a fault line shivers, we are not seeing change. We are seeing what the dream beneath the crust has decided to remember. For a moment, then it sleeps again. And so ends this first descent, not into ending, but into origin, the place where the earth holds itself in secret, where all things, even lightless oceans, even unrecorded life, even thought, come home. The deeper we go, the less the earth resembles earth. Stone becomes flow, heat becomes shape, pressure becomes the only constant. There is no up, no down, only inward. Inward, where the planet folds around itself, like thought wrapped in sleep. The mantle holds stories, not in sentences, but in motion. Convection cells rise and fall over millions of years. Like breath, like memory, hot rock rises, cool rock sinks. No hurry, no noise, just gravity's lullaby, endlessly repeated through stone. We cannot see these flows, but we feel them. They move the plates. They build the ridges in the middle of oceans. They tear open rifts in ancient land. They pull continents toward reunion or separation. They are the unspoken plan behind everything we think is solid. And below the mantle, deeper still, lies the core. Two parts, liquid outer, solid inner, iron mostly, nickel, a few drifting elements, that whisper of stars. Because that's where this began, not in stone, but in fire. The inner core is small, but it sings, it spins at a different speed than the rest of the planet. A hidden gyroscope deep within. Its spin creates motion in the liquid outer core, and from that motion comes the magnetic field, a shield that wraps the Earth in unseen lines. That protects our atmosphere from solar wind. That keeps the oceans breathing, all from deep, unlit metal, turning in silence. We owe our sky to that turning. We owe our tides to the mantle's permission. We owe our warmth to the crust's thin skin. We owe everything to what we cannot see. This is why burial is not the opposite of life. Because beneath the crust, the planet lives. It moves. It pulses. It becomes, slowly, softly, with a patience so complete it appears as rest. But nothing rests here. In seismic waves, we hear the dream. Earthquakes send tremors through the body of the world. And those waves bend, bounce, slow down, speed up. They tell us what lies below, not by showing, by echo. And from those echoes, we map the hidden world. Contours of heat, pockets of melt, ridges of high-pressure minerals that have never met the surface. We know the earth by how it sings when it breaks. Sometimes, what rises is not from the crust at all. Hot spots, deep mantle plumes, burn through the plates. From below, Hawaii, Iceland, Reunion, chains of islands trailing the drift of land above a fire that never moves. It is not destruction, it is memory, seeking release. A plume rising for millions of years through solid rock just to whisper its heat to the surface. There are rocks called kimberlites, volcanic pipes from the deep mantle. They rise fast. They carry diamonds. They explode, not with lava, but with urgency, as if the earth could not hold its breath any longer. What they carry is not just crystal, it is pressure distilled into clarity, the dream, briefly exposed, then sealed again. Sometimes the crust cracks, a rift opens, new ocean begins. The continents pull apart, and the mantle steps forward, not as self, as offering. New crust forms, basalt flows, the earth remakes its face from the heat of its sleep, and we call it beginning. But the earth knows it is remembering, even plate boundaries, those great fractures we measure with fear, are part of the dream. They are the places where the planet breathes out. Subduction zones pull crust downward. Volcanoes release pressure. Earthquakes reset the tension. It is not punishment, it is pattern. We live on the edge of the planet's exhale. Beneath it all, the pressure builds, always, gently, unfailingly. Somewhere, a pocket of heat gathers, a fault line waits, a crystal begins to turn, under stress. Not now, not tomorrow, but one day it will rise, because the dream beneath the crust never sleeps forever. And when it does wake, when the earth stretches, or sighs, or splits, what rises is not new. It is old, older than light, older than words. It is the planet showing us what it never forgot. So the next time you feel a tremor, the next time you watch ash spiral from a distant mountain, the next time you walk a fault line, cut like a scar through stone, know this: you are not witnessing disaster. You are witnessing memory. You are witnessing release. The earth letting go of something it buried so long ago, as it forgot how heavy it had become. And what it releases is never wasted. It becomes crust. It becomes land. It becomes something we will one day call home. The earth is not a sphere. Not really. It is a rhythm, a song folded into mass, a hymn pressed into stone, a harmony shaped by gravity and heated by remembrance. The crust is only the breath, the mantle, the sigh, the core, the heartbeat, and together they do not spin, they sleep, in motion, time wrapped in orbit, memory bound in mineral, a planet dreaming itself forward. We speak of the Anthropocene, a new epoch, a thin layer of consequence we will leave in the stone. Plastic, concrete, isotopes of invention. We wonder if it will fossilize, if our cities will one day be crumbled relics, pressed into future shale. But the earth is not concerned with how we end, only how we return. Already, our roads are splitting, our metals rust, our ruins sink into the soils they tried to rule. Already, we are being recycled, not in defeat, in rhythm. The earth accepts all things, tyrants, temples, tragedies. It folds them gently, beneath the crust, presses them into the mantle, waits for the heat, to turn them soft again. Then, when the time is right, it exhales, and what rises is not what fell. It is new, it is necessary. It is ash, becoming island. It is ruin, becoming reef. It is memory, becoming land. This is the dream beneath the crust, not a sleep of forgetting, a sleep of patience, where all things lost are held, where all things buried are warmed, where all things broken are given time to shift shape, and shape, in time, becomes possibility. We build monuments to endure, but the only thing that truly endures is what changes. The earth knows this, so it does not protect. It transforms. In the mantle, a molecule of water rides a slab of subducting crust. It travels hundreds of kilometers downward into realms of pressure no surface bone could bear. And still, it moves. It finds its way into olivine, then into ringwoodite, then into bridgemanite. Each step, a new form. Each transformation, a survival. It is not liquid. It is locked, but it is there. Water within stone. Stone within dream. One day, that molecule will rise again, in a plume, in a melt, in an eruption, and it will be released as steam into the air, as rain into the sea, as breath into something alive. That is how the deep earth speaks. In cycles, in patience, in return, the first oceans came from such journeys. Water once held in the interiors of asteroids and minerals was released by fire, and from that release, oceans formed. Life began in the memory of buried water. We do not swim in emptiness. We swim in exhalation. Even the moon was born of burial, an ancient impact, a tearing away, a loss so great it lifted part of the earth into orbit. And still they dance. Tide and time, pull and drift. What was torn became companion. Even rupture has rhythm. The earth has never stopped dreaming. Every second, its inner heat flows upward, through ridges, through vents, through silence. 1,000 volcanoes sleep. 10,000 more wait beneath the sea, not to destroy, to release, to let go of the heat the planet cannot keep, the heat of formation, of compression, of decay. Energy becomes memory. Memory becomes surface. Surface becomes story. And the story is not finished. It is written in drift, in subduction, in orogeny, in the slow curl of continents, reaching for each other once more. Every supercontinent breaks, every ocean closes, and every time the earth waits for the next shape to emerge, not with certainty, with faith. That folding leads to unfolding, that burial leads to breath. We are part of this. Our bones will join the sediment. Our cities will become trace. Our data will fade. But our carbon, our nitrogen, our elements, they will sink through river and root, through plate and plume, until they find the warmth again. And in that warmth, they will dream new forms. This is not loss. This is grace, to be forgotten by history, but remembered by Earth. So sleep now, knowing the planet holds you, not in cradle, in rhythm. You are not on the earth. You are within it. You are drift. You are dust. You are detail in its long inhale, and when you exhale, so does it. Let the crust carry your breath. Let the mantle warm your bones. Let the core turn in its quiet, lightless song, because the earth is not done, and neither are you. What was buried will rise. What was dreamt will return. What seemed lost was only resting beneath the crust, within the heat, carried forward in silence. Time does not pass. it settles. And in that settling, we become the next beginning.